Hey guys, tonight we slip into the dim, bluish hush of pre-dawn Egypt, where the air is still cool enough that you almost feel a shiver roll along your skin. You blink awake inside a stone chamber that smells faintly of lotus oil and last night's incense, and before you even know what's happening, you realize you've been drafted into the daily grind of an Egyptian priest. Congratulations, you're now responsible for waking a god. No pressure, and honestly, with how early these priests get up, you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know your location and local time in the comments. I'm always curious who's drifting off around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You rise before the sun even contemplates climbing over the horizon, and your first task hits you immediately. Purification. Priests don't get to roll out of bed, rub their eyes, and wander into the temple sipping a barley coffee. No, you step directly into cold water, washing your entire body in a ritual that's both spiritually necessary and physically rude at this hour. Traditional sources say priests shaved their entire bodies every few days to maintain purity. Yes, all of it. So imagine stumbling into a ritual bath with your skin prickling from the pre-dawn cold and the lingering sting of your most recent full-body shave. It's a look. You're not just cleaning off sleep, you're symbolically removing chaos itself. That's right. Every misplaced skin cell or grain of dust is another tiny piece of cosmic disorder. A mainstream historical fact, Egyptian priests performed multiple purification washes throughout the day, often 4 times or more. You, in this moment, are on wash number 1, and there are many, many more in your future. Try not to think about how your hands are already starting to wrinkle. Once you've scrubbed yourself into cosmic alignment, you smell the faint sweetness of incense drifting toward the chamber. A priest beside you holds pellets of kifi, a resinous mix of honey, wine, myrrh, and maybe a few ingredients nobody wrote down because they were secret enough to make Coca-Cola nervous. You inhale deeply, because the rules say even your breath must be clean. Some fringe accounts suggest priests chewed natron pellets to purify their mouths. Whether that's true or just the ancient equivalent of a tabloid rumor, you decide not to test it. Natron is basically nature's baking soda, but stronger. Much stronger. You step out of the water, droplets sliding down your skin, and wrap yourself in a fresh linen kilt. The linen is crisp, cool, and a little scratchy. Egyptian priests weren't out here wearing cloud-soft pajamas. The fabric is beautifully woven though, airy enough for the heat later on, and thin enough that the morning breeze, yes, Egyptian mornings do occasionally have breezes, passes right through it. There's something calming in this quiet routine. The night is lifting, but the world hasn't started buzzing yet. You hear the soft drip of the water basin behind you. Far off, maybe a donkey sighing. A hint of birds warming up in the trees near the Nile. Just enough ambient life to remind you you're part of a much larger rhythm. You pass a niche carved in the temple wall where a bowl of natron sits. You flick a pinch across your palms, letting the gritty powder scrape faintly over your skin. The scent is sharp, salty. You don't sneeze, though you desperately want to. Very unpriestly to sneeze out chaos all over yourself. As you prepare to enter the temple proper, you think about how strict these purity rules really are. Historians still argue whether priests lived full-time in ritual purity or if they simply entered service shifts, purifying only on the days they worked. Evidence goes both ways, and the debate gets oddly heated. Imagine 2 Egyptologists calmly sipping coffee while aggressively gesturing over hair removal schedules of men dead for 3,000 years. You move now through a narrow passage, the stone still cool from the night. Your footsteps echo softly. 1, 2, 3, like you're walking deeper into the world's quietest backstage area. And in a sense, you are. The temple isn't designed as public space. It's a cosmic machine, a divine house, a place where the god lives, and you and your fellow priests are the staff who keep the household running. Except your boss never sleeps, requires absolute purity, and has no problem smiting your entire city if the furniture arrangements offend them. A priest ahead of you carries a small bronze mirror, checking for missed hairs. You catch your reflection for a moment, your eyes still heavy with sleep, your shoulders tense from cold water, your linen slightly crooked. You fix it quickly. You do not want to be the priest who enters the sanctuary looking like you lost a fight with a towel. Another priest hands you a cone of scented grease. Yes, an actual cone of perfumed fat. It sits on top of the head and melts slowly through the day, keeping you perfumed in a way that is both ritual and, let's be honest, suspiciously practical in the Egyptian heat. You place it carefully atop your freshly shaved scalp. Cold at first, then slightly tacky. You'll smell like honey and lotus all morning. Modern deodorant could never. As you move closer to the inner chambers, your pulse slows. The stone walls press in, not uncomfortably, but with a kind of intentional closeness. Everything here is deliberate. Each step aligns with the idea that you're not just walking, you're participating in the cosmic order, helping the sun rise, keeping the universe from collapsing. The stakes are incredibly high for someone who's still waking up. A small joke slips into your mind. Imagine explaining to your modern friends that your job is basically cosmic maintenance technician. Good benefits, terrible hours. You pass a carved relief of the king offering incense to the gods. The carvings glow faintly in the torchlight. You run your fingers along the smooth stone, worn slightly from centuries of ceremonial brushing. There's a warmth in the patterns that feels comforting, like touching a familiar doorway every morning. One priest quietly mutters the first opening prayers under his breath. You can't quite make them out, but the cadence is steady and soothing. You fall into rhythm behind him, your steps sinking naturally, your thoughts settling. You're almost at the point where the real work begins, where you will open the doors of the sanctuary and awaken the deity. But for now you remain suspended in this moment, between darkness and dawn, between cleansing and duty, between the world outside and the sacred world within. And just like that, your day as a priest has only barely begun. You move forward with that soft, sandaled shuffle that every priest seems to master, quiet enough not to wake a sleeping cat, steady enough not to look suspicious about it. The faintest stripe of gold has begun edging the sky outside, but in here, the temple galleries remain cool, shadowed, and echoing with only the barest hint of footsteps. You're approaching the outer sanctuary now, the place where the temple gates will open, and every sense sharpens. Even half asleep, you feel the shift. This is where the sacred day truly starts. The enormous wooden doors ahead are bound with bronze studs and carved with the king offering gifts to the gods, always frozen in that perfect royal posture. As you look at the reliefs, you try not to think about how your own posture right now is more sleepy flamingo than divine perfection. A senior priest glances at you as if he heard your internal monologue. You straighten your shoulders immediately. The gods can't see you slouch, but he definitely can. A mainstream historical fact pops to mind to distract you. Temple gates weren't public entrances at all. Most temples in Egypt were entirely closed to everyday people. Only priests and the king could pass beyond the outer courtyards. So yes, when these gates open, it's not for worshippers. It's for you and the priestly team to get to work. Imagine being on shift at the world's strictest 24/7 spa, but instead of customers, you serve a divine statue that never verbally complains, yet somehow manages to hold the highest performance standards imaginable. A pair of priests stand on either side of the great doors. They look impossibly composed for this hour, but that's because they've already been chanting the opening litany for a while. Their voices roll like warm river water across the floor, touching each stone as if reminding the building to wake up too. The temple truly is treated like a living being. A beautiful one, but also a very high-maintenance roommate. Another priest hands you a small copper incense burner shaped like a lotus, and you hold it carefully. It's warm, pleasantly so, and smells of frankincense. You imagine walking through your modern apartment with a similar burner and how fast the smoke alarm would go off. Some fringe tidbit you once heard pops up. Certain later sources claim some priests used incense blends, believed to strengthen memory or induce dreams, though historians suspect these claims are more poetic than pharmacological. Still, part of you wonders whether an extra strong incense is why these priests manage such early mornings without looking exhausted. One of the priests murmurs to you, "Ready?" You nod, though your stomach whispers, "Nope, let's go back to bed. Too late now." With slow ceremonial precision, the heavy bar across the temple gates is lifted. The groan of old wood and metal fills the hall like the first stretch after sleep. Sunlight doesn't rush in dramatically. They didn't build temples for cinematic entrances, but a soft, pale glow filters through the slight openings as the doors part. As they swing outward, you feel the faintest breath of the world outside, cool morning air, a whiff of Nile moisture, the far-off calling of ibises. The sky still mostly indigo, but the horizon blushes gently as though embarrassed it overslept. You and the other priests step through the threshold. This is not the grand public courtyard yet. That part is still deeper ahead, but rather a transitional zone, a liminal space bridging the divine interior and the outside world. The temple seems larger here. Corridors stretch long and deliberate, lined with columns shaped like bundled papyrus. You walk between them as though passing between giant plant stalks, and every footstep is swaddled by the stone floor. You can practically feel the temple waking. Not in a magical, walls-shifting way, just in a subtle settling of the structure. The air shifts. Dust motes drift lazily as if stretching their tiny arms. Somewhere, a statue casts a new shadow. It's the kind of atmosphere that would make even the most cynical modern tourist pause, lower their sunglasses and whisper, "Whoa." A priest ahead of you lights a small brazier. The flame leaps, quick and eager, then settles down as if remembering its place. You trail after him, holding your own incense burner steady. The smoke melts upward, curling in slow spirals that make you want to yawn. You don't. Priests do not yawn in sacred spaces. Not officially anyway. You pass by the great hall where offerings will later be prepared. Clay jars line the walls, storing everything from wine to honey to sacred oils. You spot a scribe half hidden behind a doorway, already tallying items on a wooden tablet. His hair is tousled, his eyes puffy. You make eye contact for a moment. He nods with the universal expression of someone thinking, "We're both too tired for this." Historians still argue whether these early morning rituals were primarily symbolic acts, administrative routines, or literal service to a divine inhabitant. You don't have time to philosophize, though, because a priest taps your shoulder and gestures you forward to the next duty, sweeping incense around the perimeter walls. Yes, actual wall incense sweeping. You move the burner along the carved scenes, and for a brief moment, you feel like the world's most reverent janitor. As you walk the perimeter, your sandals whisper against the floor. You notice a small carved scene of a pharaoh smiting enemies, as they always love to depict, and you can't help but think, great, another reminder that even ancient gods had dramatic wall posters. You finish your circuit and rejoin the group at the center of the court. Another priest is preparing to open the next set of doors that lead deeper toward the sanctuary. These aren't the main sacred doors yet, but they still mark progress. Another boundary crossed, another layer of the temple peeled back. As they swing open, the light changes again. Not sunlight, torchlight. The chamber beyond is dim, glowing like the inside of a lantern. You inhale the warm resinous scent and feel your pulse settle. Even as your duties stack up, there's a strange peace here, a ritual rhythm that feels like slipping into an ancient heartbeat. You take one last look back at the outer gates, the world outside slowly brightening, and then step deeper into the temple, leaving the morning behind as the sanctuary calls you onward. You move deeper into the torchlit passage, and the air subtly shifts. Heavier, warmer, tinged with the unmistakable sweetness of incense that's been burning since before you were even born. Your steps soften automatically, as though your body knows before your mind does. You're nearing the sanctuary, the private inner chamber where the god sleeps, sealed away from unpurified eyes all night long. And now, somehow, you're responsible for waking them. This is fine, totally fine, no pressure at all. A small procession of priests forms around you like a quiet orbit. One holds a bundle of fresh linen, another carries tiny pots of sacred ointments, another keeps a steady flame cupped behind a polished metal shield. You, while still new to all this, hold a slender feather whisk meant to flick dust from the divine pedestal. Congratulations, you're now basically in charge of the god's morning skincare routine. The deeper you go, the darker the chamber becomes. Torches cling to the walls like sleepy fireflies. Their light glints across carved scenes of gods embracing kings, gods offering life to the land, gods doing all sorts of dramatic things you hope you'll never personally have to witness. The atmosphere presses inward, not oppressively, just intentionally, the way a soft blanket presses into your shoulders. This place isn't meant for crowds. It's meant for devotion, silence, and extremely careful foot placement. You stop before a small doorway framed by two statues of falcon-headed Horus figures. They gaze down at you with that eternal expression of divine judgment that says, "If you mess this up, we will absolutely know." One priest steps forward, wipes his hands with natron, and touches the sealed doors with a gesture that's half blessing, half very ancient password. A mainstream historical fact unfolds in your mind. Each dawn, priests performed the opening of the shrine ritual. This wasn't metaphorical. They literally unsealed the sanctuary, opened the shrine box, and tended to the cult statue as though waking and caring for a living deity. The statue wasn't seen as symbolic. It was considered the actual physical vessel through which the god resided in the world, meaning yes, you are in effect about to give a divine being their morning wash, wardrobe change, and breakfast tray. You didn't ask for this job, but you're committed now. With a slow creak, the sanctuary doors are unbarred. A wave of warm, fragrant air rolls out, thick with cedar oil, incense, and the stillness of the entire night. It's darker inside than you expect, nearly pitch black except for the glimmer of a single lamp that never fully extinguishes. It casts a soft golden halo over the polished surfaces within. Your breath tightens slightly. No matter how many times you've been through purification, stepping into the sanctuary feels like crossing the boundary between worlds. One wrong move, one sneeze, one stumble over your own feet, and you imagine the god gently but firmly kicking you out like, "Nope, try again next dawn, amateur." You move in, feather whisk trembling just a little between your fingers. The inner chamber is small, intimate. The shrine box, like a gilded cabinet, stands against the far wall, its wooden doors covered in gold leaf, etched with protective spells and images of guardians standing watch. The box itself gleams faintly in the lamplight, and you can almost hear it humming with importance. A priest approaches and begins the solemn recitation that precedes the opening. The words flow like honey, smooth and rhythmic, so old that even the gods might hear them with nostalgia. As he chants, another priest breaks a fresh incense pellet and drops it into a burner. The smoke curls upward like a hand reaching toward the heavens. A fringed tidbit floats through your mind. Some later traditions insist that, before opening the shrine, priests tapped lightly on the doors, almost like politely knocking to alert the deity. No one is entirely sure this ever happened, but the image of a priest knocking and whispering, "Good morning, your divine magnificence, we're coming in now," gives you mild giggles you must suppress with heroic effort. At the final phrase of the chant, the priest places both hands on the golden shrine doors and opens them. It's not dramatic. There's no mystical, light bursting out, no chorus of invisible voices. Instead, it's a soft, solemn reveal. The statue seated within, perfectly still, cloaked in last night's linens, adorned with yesterday's jewellery. The air inside the shrine feels warmer, almost cozy, like you've just opened an ancient oven full of divine significance. The statue's face catches the lamplight in subtle highlights, each curve and feature carved with such care that even now, thousands of years later, you can't help but feel watched, gently, knowingly. Egyptian priests didn't worship the material object, but they believed the god inhabited or animated it during ritual moments. So yes, you're aware of being seen. No sudden hiccups, please. You step forward when motioned, using your feather whisk to gently sweep the pedestal around the statue. The feathers glide so lightly that you barely feel resistance. You work slowly, reverently, while trying to ignore the one intrusive thought screaming, "Don't sneeze, don't sneeze, don't sneeze." Another priest removes the linens from the statue, carefully, respectfully. They fold them with the precision of someone who has been yelled at least once in their life for not folding sacred cloth properly. Then he wipes the statue with a mixture of oils, cedar, lotus, myrrh, and a blend so secret that even modern scholars still argue about what was really in it. Historians still debate whether these anointing oils were meant as symbolic rejuvenation or literal preservation against temple humidity. Some even debate if specific ingredients held magical properties or were simply expensive aromatics. The arguments get surprisingly fiery for conversations about ancient lotion. Once the statue is cleansed, the priests dress it in fresh linens. You help pass the fabric, holding it just so, making sure it never touches the floor. It feels like dressing an impossibly elegant doll, one whose fashion sense hasn't changed in centuries, and who absolutely expects you to get every fold perfect. Then come the jewellery. Broad collar, bracelets, a diadem placed carefully atop the carved head. Even in the muted light the stones glimmer. Another priest offers food. Bread, beer, honey, figs, tiny servings arranged on small trays. Offerings that the god consumes spiritually, leaving the physical food behind for later distribution to the priesthood. It's the most divine version of room service imaginable. A joke slips quietly into your thoughts. If this were modern times, you'd be delivering artisanal brunch to a very fancy roommate who never leaves their bedroom and also controls the cosmos. With the statue fully awakened, dressed and fed, the atmosphere shifts. It feels lighter somehow. The sanctity remains, but the tension eases. It's like watching the sun rise indoors, subtle but unmistakably real. You step back slowly with the others, hands pressed lightly together, and let the moment settle. The god is awake. Duties will continue. Offerings will need tending, but for now you've done the most intimate task of the entire day, and you didn't sneeze, a triumph worthy of inscription. You back away from the awakened statue with the others, and there's this almost electric stillness humming in the sanctuary, like the air itself is exhaling after holding its breath through the entire unveiling. The murmur of the priestly chants fades into a gentler rhythm now, one that signals the next part of the morning, maintaining Ma'at, the divine order, the righteous balance that keeps the entire universe from spiraling into chaos. No big deal, just your standard daily cosmic housekeeping. You step into the offering hall, a chamber wider than the sanctuary and brighter. Not bright like noon, but bright enough that the golden rims of jars and the glossy surfaces of polished stone catch the torchlight and glimmer in warm halos. Rows of offering tables stretch before you, like a quiet banquet laid out for a guest who never physically arrives, yet always receives everything. The scent in here is different. Less incense, more food. Bread fresh from the temple bakery, sweet beer still bubbling faintly at the rim of its jar, honey, cuts of meat steamed gently through the night, figs, dates, cucumbers, perfumed oils. The smell is rich but not overwhelming. More like the back room of an elite restaurant where everything is prepped at dawn by people who absolutely know their craft. A mainstream historical fact: Egyptian temples weren't just spiritual centers, they were huge economic complexes with their own bakeries, breweries, cattle herds, gardens and granaries. Maintaining offerings wasn't symbolic, it was a logistical machine. Every morning the god received a full meal prepared to perfection, and every morning the priests redistributed the leftovers among themselves, because it was considered spiritually infused but still edible. Divine leftovers, the perks of the job. You take your position next to a low table piled with bread shaped like semicircles. They look weirdly like ancient dinner rolls, and you can't help but imagine offering the god a croissant instead and getting instantly smoked. Very on brand. You help arrange the food in a precise layout. Bread in threes, beer to the right, vegetables in a neat crescent, meat slices fanned elegantly as though auditioning for a food competition show. Everything has purpose. Every placement has meaning. If you were to randomly swap two trays, some priestly supervisor would materialize behind you with the quiet intensity of a librarian who has caught you shelving a book upside down. You lift a jar of water, clear, cool, drawn from the sacred lake, and pour a measured amount into a polished bowl. The bowl's rim catches the torchlight and throws it against the wall like a soft golden ripple. There's something soothing about the way the water moves, a small mirrored sunrise blooming in its surface. A fringed tidbit drifts into your mind. In some ritual manuals, priests were instructed to offer not one but 7 different types of beer to the god each day. 7, as if the deity had a tasting flight scheduled every morning, and considering Nile beer was thick, sweet, and sometimes had floating grains, you imagine the god giving it a polite divine sip, and then sliding it quietly aside. The lead officiant begins the offering recitations, long flowing prayers listing every item placed before the god. There's a gentle cadence to them, almost hypnotic, like a lullaby sung backward. You stand still, holding a tray of onions. Yes, onion offerings were a thing. Apparently gods weren't bothered by the smell. And listen as the words echo through the chamber and up into the ceiling where carved vultures spread protective wings. Historians still argue whether Egyptians believed the god literally consumed the essence of the food, or whether the ritual was more about sustaining cosmic solidarity between humans and the divine. Some scholars insist the offerings were metaphysical nourishment. Others think they symbolized human gratitude and stability. You, meanwhile, are holding a plate of onions thinking, either way, someone is definitely crying later. Once the recitations finish, priests step forward to fan incense around the offerings. You move in sync with them, sweeping the smoke with slow motions of your hands. The air warms around your palms. You feel the offering hall shift again, not the structure itself, just the atmosphere, softening into a space that feels satisfied, like a kitchen after a lovingly cooked breakfast. Another priest signals you to help with the presentation. This involves lifting various foods briefly toward the sanctuary door, giving the seated statue beyond an unobstructed view of its meal. You raise a bowl of dates. They glisten with sticky sweetness, and you feel a tiny, guilty yearning to eat one. Not allowed. Cosmic order first, snacking later. A soft joke flutters through your tired brain. Imagine explaining this job to your modern boss. Sorry, I'll be late today. I have to present figs to a divine statue. You return the bowl to the table and step back again. The offering's now complete, the god symbolically nourished. The priests begin closing the ritual in a series of chants that gradually descend in volume, like dimming a spiritual light. The hall feels calmer, more grounded. Like the world has been successfully rebooted for the day, you help carry the trays toward the outer preparation rooms, where temple staff will later redistribute them. For now, though, you simply follow the slow, steady procession back through the corridor, the sound of your footsteps muffled by centuries of smooth stone. As you leave the offering hall, you glance back once more. The arrangement of food and drink remains perfect, undisturbed. Sunlight hasn't yet reached this room, but the lamps make everything glow like a quiet sunrise contained indoors. Cosmic duties completed? Not quite. You still have many hours ahead. But for now, you've helped secure Ma'at for another morning. And honestly, that's pretty good for someone who woke up in the dark and got spiritually air-fried with incense before breakfast. You leave the offering hall with your hands still faintly scented by incense and onions, an aroma combination that surprisingly grows on you. The corridor outside is darker, quieter, the kind of hush that feels intentional. You're heading now toward one of the most secretly important areas of the entire temple complex, the House of Life, the library where sacred texts are copied, studied, guarded, and occasionally side-eyed by priests who haven't had enough sleep yet. It's quieter than the sanctuary, quieter than the courtyards, quieter than a room full of cats on their 10th nap of the day. This isn't the public kind of library with shelves you can browse. This is the place behind the place, a sanctum of scrolls stacked in niches, resting in wooden chests tucked into sealed alcoves. And as you step through its doorway, the air shifts again, cooler, dustier, laced with ink and old papyrus. A different kind of sacredness. Not the glowing, incense-wrapped divinity of the statue chambers, but a mental, steady, scholarly holiness. A hum of knowledge. Your footsteps fall softer here without you even trying. A scribe seated cross-legged at a low table glances up at you with an expression that says, "If you knock over anything, I will unleash papyrus-related vengeance." But then he softens, recognizing you're a priest, not a clumsy visitor. He returns to his writing, reed brush scratching faintly across the sheet. A mainstream historical fact. The House of Life was a real institution in major Egyptian temples, a center for copying medical texts, magical spells, ritual hymns, astronomical calculations, and more. Priests here trained for years to reproduce texts perfectly, not because the gods would smite them for a typo, but because even a small mistake could change the meaning of a ritual entirely. Imagine miscopying a spell so it accidentally commands the sun to play hopscotch instead of rise. Disaster. You approach a low wooden chest guided by a librarian priest whose job seems to be equal parts scholar, guardian, and silent judge of everyone's penmanship. He opens the chest carefully, as if it contains baby birds. Inside, scrolls wrapped in linen bands, each labelled with ink. You spot titles like Book of Knowing Creations, Ritual for Calling the Sun, Spell for Banishing Scorpions, possibly relevant later if the temple cats are slacking, and something ominously wrapped in red cloth that your guide absolutely does not explain. There's a fringe tidbit about that. Some texts were wrapped in red because the colour symbolised danger or chaos. They might have been too magically powerful, too ancient, or too complicated for everyday use. Scholars debate which of these explanations is correct, partly because ancient priests never wrote little sticky notes saying, "Warning, do not read this unless you're the high priest and it's a Tuesday." Missed opportunity. The librarian priest gestures you toward a scribe who seems, by the look of his hunched shoulders, to have been writing for at least 3 lifetimes. His reed pen dips into a small pot of ink. Black made from soot and water, red made from ochre. Red ink highlights divine names, headings, warnings, and the ancient equivalent of "seriously don't skip this part." You sit beside him as he smooths a fresh piece of papyrus. It's crisp, light, crackling faintly under his fingertips. He hands you a sheet that needs dusting, your simple task, and you brush it gently with a soft cloth. The papyrus fibers feel delicate but surprisingly tough, a little like the universe's oldest high-quality stationery. As the scribe works, he murmurs the text aloud. Soft, rhythmic phrases about purification, light, protection. You begin to feel sleepy again, but the librarian priest standing behind him has the aura of someone who can sense drowsiness from 20 cubits away. You straighten. Your eyes drift toward another table, where a younger trainee squints at a diagram of star positions. Egyptian priests weren't just religious leaders. They tracked astronomy, calculated calendars, and synchronized rituals with celestial cycles. The boy mutters to himself, tapping the papyrus with the intensity of someone who just realized the cosmos might be slightly out of alignment with his homework. Historians still argue whether the House of Life was also a medical school. Some scholars think priests practiced healing here because many surviving texts combine spells and medical remedies. Others think those scrolls were simply archived, not actively taught. The debate feels eternal, like a scholarly tug-of-war played across centuries of footnotes. As you watch the scribe's work, you notice something charming. The occasional doodle in the margin, a tiny falcon, a lotus, a cat. Yes, even here in the sacred House of Life, someone in 1200 BCE doodled a cat in the corner of a spell. Human nature is eternal. The room glows now as a sliver of sunlight finally reaches the high stone slats carved near the ceiling. It doesn't illuminate much, just lights the dust motes floating like sleepy golden snow. The scribe lifts his brush, blows gently on the ink to dry it, and rolls the finished scroll with practiced grace. He ties it with thin linen, then hands it to you to place back in the chest. You cradle it carefully. It feels important, ancient, alive in a quiet way. The kind of knowledge that whispers rather than shouts. When you return the scroll to its resting place, you notice one last niche tucked deeper into the room, sealed behind a wooden door bound with copper. The librarian priest notices your glance and gives the faintest smile that says, "You're not ready for that chamber," which is exactly the kind of statement guaranteed to make your curiosity sprint laps. But you turn away responsibly. For now. As you step out of the House of Life, you feel a strange steadiness settle into your bones. You've awakened the god, fed them, upheld cosmic order, and now touch the knowledge that sustains the rituals themselves. And it's barely mid-morning. You take a deep breath of the cooler air outside the library, and for a moment you imagine yourself centuries from now. Someone finding your own tiny scribbles and wondering what ancient person left them behind. Probably someone very tired. You step out from the cool, papyrus-scented hush of the House of Life, and immediately the air feels different. Warmer, fuller, carrying faint murmurs from a nearby courtyard. It's the kind of low, steady sound you recognize now. People waiting. Not crowds, not temple visitors, because they aren't allowed inside, but petitioners. Individuals who've come seeking help from the priests who serve not just the gods, but the practical needs of their community. Today you're heading into the part of the temple most outsiders never imagined existed. The healing chambers. The corridor gets brighter as you walk, sunlight spilling in through narrow slats high above, creating golden stripes across the floor. You follow the path until you reach a room with carved columns shaped like blooming papyrus, and inside you see a handful of people. Tired-looking farmers, a mother with a sleepy toddler, an older man rubbing his shoulder with the expression of someone who's been awake too long with too much pain. Their voices hush when you enter, not out of fear, but respect. Priests carry authority here, not political power, but something gentler. Knowledge, remedies, guidance, ritual comfort. A mainstream historical fact floats in your mind. Many Egyptian temples functioned as healing centers. Priests practiced a blend of medicine, ritual, herbal knowledge, and incantations. They weren't physicians the way we imagine today, but they held medical scrolls, treated wounds, mixed remedies, and performed rituals meant to restore balance. Illness wasn't just physical, it was a disturbance in harmony, something that required spiritual realignment as much as herbal treatment. So yes, temples were part hospital, part pharmacy, part cosmic alignment clinic. You kneel near a low wooden table where jars of herbs and unguents are arranged in neat rows. There's dried mint, crushed cumin, fir resin, honey, ancient Egypt's universal cure-all, and something that smells like someone boiled the wrong plant by mistake. You pick up a small jar of honey and notice a thin reed quill sticking out of it. You remember reading that honey was used as an antibacterial dressing, practical and delicious. But you don't lick your fingers because that would definitely get you side-eyed by at least 4 priests. A healer priest guides you to a patient, a young man with a swollen ankle, wincing as he sits on the cool stone bench. You kneel, examine the ankle the way you've seen others do, press lightly around the bone, check the temperature, watch the man's reaction. You don't pretend to be a full healer, but you help where you can. You mix honey with ground herbs, applying it gently with a strip of clean linen. The man sighs, relief already blooming across his face. The moment feels simple, human, grounded in kindness rather than cosmic obligation. As you work, a fringe tidbit comes to mind. Some ancient medical papyri mention remedies that include blood of a worm, dung of a gazelle, or urine of a boy. Most scholars agree these ingredients were symbolic or mistranslations, but still imagine sitting across from a priest who says, "Good news, your cure involves powdered gazelle poop." You shiver. Thankfully, your jar contains no such horrors today. Nearby, another priest is diagnosing a child with what seems like a fever. He places his hand gently on the child's forehead, murmuring a prayer to Sekhmet, goddess of both healing and destruction. The duality is comforting, terrifying, both. The mother watches with a mixture of hope and fear, clutching the child's small hand. You glance at them and feel something tighten in your chest. Recognition of timeless human worry. Some things never change, even across 3,000 years. Historians still argue whether priests leaned more on medical knowledge or magical rituals for healing. Some scholars insist Egyptian medicine was surprisingly advanced, using honey, mouldy bread, and herbs with real antiseptic properties. Others argue that the rituals were equally important, addressing emotional and spiritual needs. You, meanwhile, see both happening in front of you, a priest grinding herbs while chanting softly under his breath. It's not a contradiction, it's a complete system. A woman approaches you next, asking for a protection charm for her husband who must travel through crocodile-ridden waters. You try to maintain a composed priestly face, but internally your brain yelps, crocodiles again. These things are everywhere. You guide her to the side table where amulets are stored, selecting one shaped like Taweret, the hippo goddess who protects families. She thanks you with such sincere relief that you feel a little taller for a moment, even though the amulet is doing the heavy lifting here. You pass deeper into the healing suite and find a small room used for steam treatments. A clay pot emits fragrant vapor, eucalyptus-like, sharp, clearing. A priest hands you a towel soaked in cool water, and you help wrap it around the forehead of an older man suffering from headaches. The man closes his eyes, breathing in the scented steam, and for a moment the room feels like the world's first spa. Then another priest calls for your help with a different case, a man who believes he's been cursed. His posture is rigid, his eyes darting with fear. You assist by arranging ritual tools, a bowl of purified water, an amulet, a small coil of incense. The officiating priest speaks calmly, grounding the man's fear with words as much as with ritual motions. The atmosphere softens gradually, as though the room itself exhales. You watch and learn. Healing here is an act of presence, not just treatment. As the morning wears on, the crowd thins. People leave with bandaged limbs, herbal packets, protective spells, or simply lighter hearts. The room grows quiet again, sunlight shifting across the columns in slow, tender patterns. When the last patient departs, you feel your shoulders relax. You helped more people in an hour than you expected to in a lifetime of temple service. And though you're no master healer, you've touched the part of priestly life that is closest to everyday humanity, caring for those who hurt, fear, or hope. You clean your hands in a bowl of cool water, the scent of mint and honey lingering on your skin. It's not glamorous work, but it's real, grounded, human, and you can't deny the small sense of pride humming inside you. Priesting, you decide, isn't just cosmic dusting and statue care. Sometimes it's just making someone feel a little better. You step away from the healing chambers with the faint smell of honey still clinging to your fingertips, and as you move down the shaded corridor, you hear a different sound. Soft scraping, light tapping, and the distant murmur of someone muttering calculations under their breath. It's the unmistakable soundtrack of the temple's astronomical wing. Yes, priests didn't just heal people, wake gods, and oversee offerings. They were also astronomers, calendar keepers, and cosmic schedulers. Which means, lucky you, it's time to go climb some stairs and stare at stars you can barely see in daylight. The passage leads you outside to a small courtyard where sunlight spills in clean, bright lines. A set of stone steps winds up the side of a low building, and as you ascend, the air grows crisper. At the top, you find yourself on a flat rooftop platform, wide open to the sky and rimmed with carved stone railings. From here, you can see the horizon stretching in all directions, the Nile glinting far off, the fields beginning to shimmer in the morning heat, the temple walls rising like enormous ancient bookends around your view. Several priests are already there, clustered around tall wooden sighting poles stuck upright in the ground. Each pole has a notch near its top, your ancient Egyptian version of a telescope. No lenses, no glass, just careful sight lines, and an understanding of celestial geometry that would make modern stargazers nod respectfully. A mainstream historical fact: Egyptian priests were responsible for tracking the heliacal rising of Sirius, the star whose annual first appearance just before dawn signaled the Nile flood. They also recorded star movements, moon phases, and solar shifts, creating calendars that guided agriculture, religious festivals, and civic routines. Basically, they were human cosmic planners, and without them, the whole year would fall apart faster than your sleep schedule during exam week. You approach the nearest priest, who's holding a notched palm rib tablet covered in small marks, some fresh, some from decades past. He gestures for you to take position by one of the sighting poles. You squint through the notch, aligning it with a faint pale ghost of a star barely visible in the brightening sky. The priest watches your line of sight, compares it to his tablet, nods slightly, and murmurs a measurement you absolutely do not understand. It's fine, just pretend you do. Nod wisely. Yes, very cosmic, much astronomy. Another priest unfolds a papyrus chart weighed down with a polished stone. Lines cross it like spider silk, tracking star positions, festival dates, lucky days, unlucky days, and days that are technically fine but maybe avoid starting a new business. That last one isn't written down, but you get the vibe. A fringed tidbit surfaces. Some ancient texts describe extremely complex star clocks painted inside coffins, with rows of deities marking hours throughout the night. Scholars still debate whether priests used these charts for practical timekeeping, or whether they were symbolic guides meant for the deceased. It's the kind of argument that sounds polite on paper, but probably caused at least one heated, "No, you don't understand the star demons" moment in academic circles. One of the senior astronomer priests motions you over to another part of the rooftop, where a wide rectangular slab lies engraved with channels and marks. It looks almost like a giant board game, but this is their measuring table, used to track shadow length throughout the day. He places a slender gnomon, a shadow-casting rod, upright in its slot. The sun climbs higher, and the shadow crawls slowly across the engraved lines. You watch it inch forward like the world's most ancient sacred sundial. The priest grunts thoughtfully. "Good," he says, then adds, "No storm today." You look at the sky, crystal clear, serene, and wonder if he's genuinely reading something in the shadow's behavior, or just flexing priestly intuition. Historians still argue whether Egyptian astronomical observations were driven more by ritual timing or agricultural necessity. Some say the priests followed strict cosmic cycles to ensure that festivals aligned with the gods' symbolic journeys. Others argue that practical seasonal timing was the real motive. You, staring at a shadow on a stone slab, decide the answer might be both, and also that your neck hurts from looking up too long. As the morning grows brighter, the rooftop fills with a gentle hum of conversation. Priests compare notes, debate alignment angles, and tease the younger trainees who keep mixing up east and slightly more east. You help by recording a few measurements on a wooden tablet, your handwriting just barely neat enough to avoid scolding. A breeze slips across the rooftop, carrying with it the distant smell of bread baking in temple ovens. You're suddenly aware that you haven't eaten anything since before dawn, and your stomach grumbles at a volume that could awaken a lesser deity. One of the astronomer priests glances over and raises an eyebrow. You mouth, "Sorry." He shrugs. The stars don't judge hunger. As you observe the priest's meticulous process, aligning sighting poles with star charts, whispering calculations, marking shadow paths, you begin to feel something you didn't expect. Calm. There's a rhythm here too, just like in the sanctuary, a sense that by tracking the heavens you're tethering Earth to something vast and orderly, holding chaos at bay with geometry. You glance again at the horizon. The sun now glints bright gold, the light warm on your face. Down below, the temple bustles quietly with other duties, but up here time moves differently, slower, more patient. One priest hands you a small cup of cool water and says, "Good work today." You take a sip. The water tastes faintly of minerals, clean and refreshing. For a moment you allow yourself a tiny stretch, feeling your shoulders loosen. Astronomy might not be as dramatic as awakening a god, but it has its own magic. After all, you're helping to keep time itself aligned. You descend from the rooftop, legs still tingling from standing so long in the sun, and as soon as your sandals touch the shaded corridor again, you sense the shift in atmosphere. The quiet precision of astronomy fades behind you, replaced by a steady, earthy hum, the unmistakable sound of work. Real work, the kind that smells like grain, dust, clay jars, and mild accounting anxiety. You're heading into one of the most unexpectedly chaotic parts of Egyptian temple life, the administrative and economic halls. And yes, it turns out priests weren't just cosmic janitors and ritual specialists. They also managed giant storerooms filled with food, linen, livestock records, accounting tablets, and more bureaucracy than your modern tax office on a Monday morning. The corridor widens until it opens into a bright courtyard where scribes sit cross-legged with wooden tablets balanced on their knees. The tapping of reed pens echoes like a hive of very organized bees. A scribe glances up at you with the expression of someone who has been awake too long and has seen far too many grain receipts today. You nod respectfully. He nods back with the solemn suffering of a man preparing to tally another batch of cattle. A mainstream historical fact. Egyptian temples were enormous economic engines. They owned farmland, herds, workshops, barges, breweries, bakeries, and forests of papyrus. Priests oversaw all of it, not as personal wealth, but as the god's estate, which means every loaf of bread, every piece of linen, every cow, and every jar of beer had to be recorded with absolute precision. Think of it as running a mega corporation, where your boss is a deity who cannot be questioned but also never sends memos. You follow a senior priest into a long hall, flanked by towering shelves of clay jars. Some are labelled with small ink marks, others with tags tied around their necks. The air here is warm and slightly dusty, filled with the cozy, heavy smell of grain. A few tiny motes float lazily in the beams of sunlight filtering through high slats. A scribe stands nearby, counting jars with the seriousness of someone guarding the universe's most important pantry. On a central table sits a pile of calc tablets covered in scratches, records of deliveries, distributions, and taxes paid in kind. You pick one up and trace the carved lines with your thumb. The symbols note quantities of barley, dates, and emmer wheat. It looks simple enough, until the scribe beside you begins rattling off numbers faster than your brain is prepared to process. You nod politely, as if absorbing every detail instead of internally whispering, "Sir, I barely passed celestial geometry 10 minutes ago." You help carry a jar to a weighing station, where a priest adjusts a wooden balance with small stones. The jar sways slightly as he measures it with precise movements. When he gives you the signal, you jot down the result on a fresh tablet. Your handwriting moderately straight, your fingers only slightly shaking from the pressure of not messing up a divine inventory. A fringed tidbit bubbles up. In some temple accounts, scribes included humorous doodles, tiny cows, exaggerated stick figures, even a suspiciously smug-looking baboon. Scholars debate whether these were jokes, personal marks, or subtle complaints about workload. Considering how tired the scribes look, you suspect all three. From the granary hall, you're led into another chamber where livestock records are kept. The smell announces itself before you even enter. Warm, grassy, a little sour. Priests here track herds owned by the temple. Cattle, goats, occasionally donkeys. Several clay tablets show carved little cow heads next to numbers. One scribe is deep into a spirited argument with another over whether a particular calf should be categorized as temple property or a private donation. You slip by quietly before getting drafted into their debate. Historians still argue whether temple economic power made priests political rivals to the state, or whether they acted primarily as caretakers of sacred wealth. Some Egyptian kings kept a watchful eye on temple resources, others seem content to let priest-run sprawling estates unchecked. The truth likely varies by dynasty, region, and how well the royal treasury was doing that year. You continue deeper, where the air cools again. Here you find long storage rooms lined with linen bundles, immaculate, bleached, and folded so perfectly that you're afraid to breathe near them. Linen was a kind of currency, an offering, a tax form, and the base material of purity. Temple weavers worked constantly to produce these bolts, and priests distributed them as needed for rituals, mummification, clothing, and even wages. One priest gestures for your help, rolling a bolt of linen onto a storage shelf. You lift one end, it's surprisingly heavy, and slide it into place. The linen brushes your arm, soft and cool, smelling faintly of flax. For a moment you imagine taking some home to make a pillowcase, then immediately imagine the cosmic consequences and dismiss the thought. Further on, the corridor narrows, leading you to the cattle tally room. A young scribe sits behind a low desk, scribbling numbers faster than seems physically possible. He glances up, sees you, and waves a tablet in your direction. "Take this to the grain hall," he says breathlessly. You accept it, glance down, and realize you're holding a detailed record of which animals ate what and when. It's essentially an ancient spreadsheet, complete with mistakes crossed out so aggressively they look like emotional damage marks. You return the tablet and watch as the scribes continue their work. The atmosphere here is strangely comforting, practical, earthly, grounded. After the cosmic symbolism, the healing rituals, and the star watching, there's something refreshing about the simple truth of people counting jars and writing numbers. You move next into the distribution area, where temple workers arrive to collect their daily rations. Priests oversee the handouts, recording who receives grain, who receives oil, and who receives beer. Lots of beer. Ancient Egyptians considered beer a staple food, not a luxury, which explains why every worker leaves carrying a jar with the reverence of someone protecting their entire lunch plan. As the last worker departs, the hall quiets. You help sweep scattered grains from the floor. Yes, priests also sweep. And the simple rhythm of the broom against stone feels almost meditative. You step back and look at the now-ordered storeroom. Everything tallied, everything in place. The economy of the temple hums on, a silent engine behind all the rituals and ceremonies, and somehow, even with all that work, you feel a little more grounded. Sometimes divinity is found in incense and statues. Sometimes it's found in perfectly counted jars of barley. You leave the storerooms with your head full of numbers, grain tallies, cow counts, linen rolls stacked like silent sacred lasagnas, and step into a quieter corridor where the air instantly changes again. It smells different here. Warm beeswax, sharp stone dust, and faint whiffs of paint. You recognize these scents now. They mean you are approaching one of the temple's most secretive but surprisingly creative areas. Not a sanctuary, not a treasury, the workshops. Yes, behind the monumental walls and echoing halls lies a world of chisels, pigments, tiny metal tools, soft brushes, and artisans hunched over half-finished sacred objects. Most people outside the priesthood never saw this part of the temple. To them, statues simply existed. Perfect, divine, immovable. They never imagined the quiet army of craftsmen laboring behind the scenes, guided by priests who checked every line, every shade, every symbolic detail with merciless precision. You step inside the first workshop and immediately your ears fill with soft tapping, rhythmic, controlled, almost musical. A row of artisans sits on low stools carving a slab of limestone destined to become a relief panel. Chips of stone flick off with each careful strike, spraying the floor in pale dust that tickles your nose. One artisan pauses, wipes his brow with the back of his hand, then squints at a reference sketch resting nearby. He adjusts his angle and resumes carving. A mainstream historical fact: temple workshops produced nearly everything used in rituals: statues, jewelry, furniture, ritual knives, incense burners, amulets, even the wooden barks used in festivals. And the work was not random artistry. Every angle, colour, proportion and symbol had meaning defined by theological guidelines. Priests oversaw it all, ensuring no detail broke cosmic rules. Even a slight misproportioned eye on a statue could be considered ritually incorrect. A supervising priest approaches you with a wooden palette coated in dried paint streaks. He hands you a small jar of crushed malachite, the kind of vivid green that makes you think of lush riverbanks. "Take this to the painter's room," he says, nodding down a narrow hallway. You hold the jar carefully, trying not to breathe too hard lest the priceless powder puff into the air like expensive fairy dust. The painter's chamber is warm and bright, illuminated by a long slit high in the wall that pours sunlight directly onto a mural in progress. The colours nearly glow: rich blues, sunset reds, deep golds. Artisans crouch close, steadying their hands as they outline a god's face with black pigment. One painter dips a thin reed brush into a clay palette, then adds a stroke so delicate you barely see the brush move. You hand over the malachite. The painter smiles with quiet gratitude and begins mixing it with a little gum arabic and water. The resulting paint shimmers in the light like crushed jewels. When he applies it to the feathers of a depicted winged goddess, the entire image seems to breathe. A fringe tidbit flickers into your mind. Some ancient temples kept secret paint recipes known only to a few master artisans and priests. These recipes might include odd additives, like ground copper, pomegranate rind, or even fermented plant juices, to create certain magical hues believed to hold protective power. Historians debate whether these ingredients were symbolic, practical, or simply artistic superstition. Whatever the truth, you watch the malachite paint settle into the mural and feel a strange tingle of reverence. Another priest beckons you toward the metalwork alcove. Here, artisans hammer tiny gold sheets onto wooden figurines meant for offerings. The tapping is soft, almost tender, like a lullaby sung through metal. One artisan uses a tool so fine it resembles a dental pick, adjusting the curve of a miniature crown no larger than your thumbnail. The priest supervising him peers closely, murmuring instructions. More curve on the uraeus. The cobra must watch upward. You inhale the warmish metallic scent and almost cough, but you suppress it. Coughing near gold leaf seems like a catastrophic idea. Nearby, a young novice is attempting to polish a bronze mirror. He's working furiously, sweating, frowning, and the mirror still looks dull. You sit next to him, gently take the cloth, and show him a slower circular motion you saw another craftsman use earlier. The bronze gradually brightens, reflecting the room in a soft amber sheen. The novice beams at you, like you've just taught him a life secret, which honestly feels kind of nice. The workshop halls continue deeper. You find a room filled with wood shavings where carpenters carve ritual furniture. Shrines, offering tables, little stands for incense bowls. The smell of cedarwood fills your lungs, warm and comforting. One carpenter uses a bow drill with a smooth, practiced rhythm, sending curls of wood spiraling to the floor like tiny wooden ribbons. You trail your fingers along a nearly finished shrine panel, the surface silky from hours of sanding. The carved hieroglyphs feel cool under your touch. Tiny birds, zigzags, feathers, and symbols representing eternal life. It's beautiful, but also precise, not decorative for beauty's sake, but engineered for spiritual architecture. Historians still argue whether workshop artisans were temple employees or outside specialists brought in for specific commissions. Some evidence suggests full-time artisans lived within temple complexes. Other evidence implies they were independent craftsmen working under priestly supervision. You decide the debate doesn't matter much. You're watching them work right now, and it's clear they form the quiet backbone of everything sacred. As you continue walking, you spot a craftsman painting the eyes onto a statue, a delicate final step believed to activate the power of the image. He leans close, breath steady, hand unwavering. When he finishes the outline, the statue's gaze seems to shift, gaining a depth it lacked moments before. You shiver despite the warmth. A priest notices your reaction. "Art gives the gods a place to rest their presence," he says softly. "Respect the hands that shape it." You nod, absorbing the truth of it. The gods' images aren't just decorations, they're vessels of connection, and the people crafting them are performing their own kind of devotion. You help carry a newly painted panel toward a storage alcove where finished pieces rest until used in festivals or rituals. The panel is heavier than you expect, and you grip it tightly, determined not to be the novice remembered for dropping a sacred object. You place it gently among other gleaming works. They look like a silent choir of colour and craftsmanship, waiting for their moment. As you leave the workshops, your fingertips tingling from touching gold, wood, and pigment, you realise you've glimpsed a different side of priestly life, one filled with creativity, discipline, and a devotion expressed not through prayer, but through precision. And honestly, it's kind of beautiful. You leave the glowing world of workshops, your fingertips still buzzing from gold dust and malachite, and step back into a corridor where the light dims and the air cools. The quiet here is different. Not the hush of a sanctuary, not the concentrated silence of a library, but something softer, gentler, tinged with the subtle murmur of young voices trying and failing to whisper quietly. Ah, the novice training wing. You follow the sound, and as you approach a wide doorway you spot them, half a dozen young trainees seated on reed mats, backs as straight as fence posts, eyes focused on a priest speaking at the front of the room, or mostly focused. One boy is definitely staring at a beetle crawling across the floor with the expression of someone seeing divine mystery, even though it's just a beetle doing beetle things. Training a priest isn't glamorous. It's not all cosmic alignments and grand rituals. Most of it looks a lot like school, long hours, memorization, endless drilling of procedures, and learning not to drop valuable objects. Kind of like ancient sacred boot camp, minus the push-ups, but plus a lot of papyrus quizzes. A mainstream historical fact. Priestly training often began young, especially for boys born into priestly families. They learn to read hieroglyphs, recite hymns, purify themselves correctly, follow ritual timing, and handle sacred tools with almost ridiculous precision. Some became ritual singers, others incense bearers, astronomers, scribes, healers, a whole spectrum of sacred jobs. You step into the room, and the supervising priest, an older man with a shaved head and eyes that probably see every mistake within a 30-cubit radius, waves you forward. "Sit with them," he murmurs. "Help them practice the response lines." You lower yourself onto a mat next to a boy whose linen kilt is slightly crooked and whose reed pen is stained with 3 different colours of ink. He looks at you with that wide-eyed awe trainees always have when a full priest drops into their study hall. You smile reassuringly, even though part of you still feels like a trainee yourself. The older priest begins reciting a hymn to Amun, and the novices repeat it back. A little too fast, a little too enthusiastic, like someone trying to chant while sprinting. You gently tap the boy's knee. "Slower," you whisper. He nods, inhales, and tries again. Much better. One novice sneezes loudly, and the supervising priest pauses mid-chant. The room goes dead silent. The boy looks like he wants to evaporate into sand grains. The supervising priest finally nods and continues, but the tension lingers. You can practically taste the fear sweat. Later, the boy leans over and whispers to you. "Does the god hear sneezes?" You whisper back, "Only the really dramatic ones." He suppresses a smile and relaxes. A fringe tidbit drifts into your mind. Some ancient sources claim trainee priests practice certain rituals using clay figurines, or practice objects instead of actual sacred tools. The idea was to avoid damaging precious items while learning the correct motions. Whether this was common or just an occasional training technique is debated, but you like the idea of a young novice practicing a sacred blessing on a little clay hippo. The supervising priest now leads a drill on handling ritual vessels. He places 3 small jars on the floor, one filled with water, one with oil, one with nothing at all. The novices must pick up each jar in a specific grip using both hands, lift it to shoulder height, rotate it slightly, and present it forward without spilling a drop. This goes as you'd expect. The first boy lifts the jar fine, rotates it too fast and nearly loses the lid. The priest sighs so deeply the room temperature drops several degrees. The second boy does well until he panics halfway through and freezes mid-motion, stuck like an awkward statue. The third boy spills one drop, just one, and every novice gasps like they've witnessed a cosmic catastrophe. The supervising priest simply hands him a cloth and says, "Again." You help steady their hands, demonstrating slower movements. One boy grips the jar too tightly, knuckles white. "Relax," you whisper. "It's a vessel, not a crocodile." He laughs nervously, loosens his grip and tries again, successfully this time. Historians still argue whether trainees lived inside temple compounds or simply attended daily lessons while living at home. Some evidence suggests novices came from priestly lineages and rotated through apprenticeships. Other evidence points to more formal priestly schools. The truth is probably a mix. Egyptian systems loved flexibility disguised as tradition. After vessel drills, the supervising priest assigns a group exercise, reciting purification steps in the correct order. This is where the real chaos begins. One novice shouts step 3 before step 2. Another mixes up incense with natron. A third accidentally recites a line from a different ritual entirely. Something about warding off snakes. Helpful, but not relevant. You help them sort through the sequence, repeating it until their voices settle into a soft, confident rhythm. The room gradually grows warmer with concentration. Not physical warmth, but mental warmth, the kind that builds when people learn together. Eventually, the supervising priest nods in approval. "Good," he says. "Now, writing practice." A collective groan rises, quiet but heartfelt. You sit beside them at low wooden desks as they dip reed pens into soot ink and practice hieratic script. Fast, cursive, temple shorthand. Their strokes wobble. Yours? Well, yours wobble a little too, but you do your best. One boy accidentally smears his ink and sighs dramatically. You hand him extra papyrus with a sympathetic pat. Between writing drills, you notice another group practicing silent walking. Yes, walking. Priests must move like whispers during rituals, so novices train to place their feet softly, heelless, gliding like ghosts. You watch them tiptoe across the room, arms out for balance. One boy steps on a reed, snaps it loudly, and winces like the universe just docked his cosmic points. The supervising priest gestures for you to demonstrate proper movement. You straighten your back, soften your knees, and glide forward smoothly. The novices watch you like you're pulling off some mystical ancient ballet. You sort of enjoy the attention. At last, the session winds down. The trainees bow to their instructor, roll up their mats, and shuffle out with tired but proud faces. They chatter softly about who spilled what, who mispronounced which word, and which of them walked most silently. You smile. Priestly life starts with this earnest effort, this clumsy devotion. As the room clears, the supervising priest turns to you. "You were patient," he says. "That matters more than perfection." You nod, and for a moment the sunlight streaming through the doorway feels warmer. Being a priest isn't just about serving gods. It's about shaping the next generation who will. You slip out of the novice training hall with a faint smile still tugging at your mouth. Something about seeing a room full of trainees panic over a single spilled drop of oil makes you feel oddly nostalgic. But the moment you turn down the next corridor, the air changes again. It thickens, warms, and begins to pulse with something alive. Not voices, not footsteps. Something more melodic. Something older, deeper. Music. You follow the sound instinctively, drawn down a hallway where the stone walls seem to vibrate with low humming. As you approach a wide chamber, the scent of burning incense returns, sweet and resinous. And then you hear it clearly. Layered chanting, a rhythmic rustle of sistrum rattles, the gentle tap of hand drums. You've stepped into one of the temple's most enchanting spaces, the rehearsal rooms where ritual musicians prepare the day's sacred hymns. You slide into the doorway and pause. The room glows with torchlight, its walls painted with scenes of lotus blossoms, papyrus thickets, and goddesses holding instruments. A small group of priests, some young, some older, stand in a semicircle, each holding a sistrum, that sacred rattle associated with Hathor. The metal discs on each instrument catch the light and tremble softly with every motion. One priestess, Yes, musical roles were sometimes held by women, though roles varied by time and temple, steps forward and sets the pace, her voice rising in a steady stream of melodic chants. The others join in, their voices weaving together like woven linen threads. The harmony is haunting, hypnotic, and surprisingly gentle for a group that woke up before sunrise. A mainstream historical fact surfaces. Music was essential in Egyptian temple rituals. Priests didn't just chant. They played harps, lutes, sistrums, clappers, cymbals, and frame, drums. The music wasn't entertainment. It was a form of worship meant to soothe, honor, awaken, and occasionally protect. Many gods were believed to love specific instruments: Hathor the sistrum, Bastet the harp, Sekhmet the rhythmic drum patterns that calmed her fiery nature. The lead musician notices you and beckons you closer. You approach quietly, stepping around a neatly arranged row of instruments laid out on a low table. There's a small harp carved from cedar with gracefully curved arms, strings made from animal gut, a drum with a tanned leather head stretched tight, bronze clappers shaped like slender hands, and several sistrums, some simple bronze frames, others ornate, shimmering with gold leaf. A musician hands you one. It's surprisingly heavy, the metal cool against your palms. You shake it gently, and the soft jingling shivers through the room like sunlight dancing on water. The group smiles at your cautious first attempt. "Relax," one of them whispers. "It's not going to explode." You try again, looser this time, and the sound blends seamlessly with the chant. A fringe tidbit comes to mind. Some texts describe musicians using altered rhythms or particular notes to ward off malevolent spirits. Certain vibrations were believed to soothe divine beings or repel chaotic forces. Scholars debate whether these techniques held magical significance or were simply poetic descriptions of mood and ritual effect. Honestly, standing here in the swirl of sound, you can see why the debate exists. The music feels powerful, like it vibrates through bone and memory. The group pauses and shifts into a different practice: vocal warm-ups. These are far less sacred and far more chaotic. You witness a line of priests making elongated vowel sounds, one cracking embarrassingly mid-note, another yawning in the middle of a chant. The lead musician taps him with a sistrum and says, "If you yawn on temple time again, the goddess will think you're bored." He blushes deeply. You bite back a smile. Next comes rhythm training. The drum priest taps out complex patterns, boa-boom, baba-boom, and the novices try to imitate him. One boy is consistently early, one consistently late, and one seems to be following the beat of an entirely different universe. The drum priest gives you a look that says, "Why do I do this to myself?" You shrug sympathetically. As the group resets, a musician steps aside and begins tuning the harp. The soft, plucking notes drift through the room like falling feathers. You can't help but close your eyes for a moment. It's calming in a way that feels ancient and immediate all at once. Historians still argue whether temple musicians were full priests, specialized cultic performers, or members of hereditary music guilds tied to specific gods. Evidence varies by city and period. But standing here, you sense that titles might not matter. What matters is the devotion in their sound. Every note feels like a prayer, shaped into vibration. The lead musician gestures for you to join the next chant. You take a breath and follow along as best you can. The words are slow, melodic, and you find yourself syncing with the others, your voice slipping into the chant like a thread woven into a vast tapestry. The rhythm of the sistrum in your hands keeps time with your heartbeat. Jing, jing, sha, jing, sha, and you feel oddly at home in this moment. After one last hymn, the group breaks to rest their voices. Few sip water, one massages his jaw, another flicks a sistrum absent-mindedly, sending tiny sparks of sound through the air. You sit beside them, your body still humming with the echo of chanting. A young musician nudges you. "Did you like it?" he asks. His eyes are bright, excited. You nod. "It's comforting," you murmur. He grins. "That's the point. Music makes the gods gentle." You stay a little longer, watching the group pack away instruments. One carefully folds a cloth over the harp. Another wipes down a bronze clapper, treating each tool with reverence. They store them in carved wooden cases before extinguishing the torches one by one. The room dims. The last sistrum settles into silence, and when you step out into the corridor again, the echo of their music follows you like a soft, invisible warmth. You walk away from the lingering hum of music, the last jingling notes of the sistrum fading behind you like the tail end of a dream, and as you follow a narrow passageway that curves around the side of the temple complex, the smell changes again. Not incense, not paint, not grain or herbs or beeswax, something earthier, wetter, warmer. You're heading toward the animal precinct. Egyptian temples weren't just homes to gods, they were homes to creatures believed to embody the god's presence on earth. Cows, falcons, baboons, ibises, crocodiles, cats. Depending on the deity, the holy creature varied. And the priests didn't just admire them, they fed them, washed them, tended their injuries, monitored their behavior like dedicated cosmic veterinarians. It was a sacred job, a strange job, occasionally a terrifying job, especially on crocodile duty, but a job nonetheless. You step into a courtyard partially open to the sky. Sunlight floods the space, illuminating stone basins, low enclosures, and small shrines dedicated not to divine statues but to divine animals. A few priests move quietly through the area, carrying baskets of fish or bowls of grain. The chirping, croaking, squeaking, and occasional snapping noises echo lightly off the walls. A mainstream historical fact, many Egyptian temples maintained sacred animals believed to be living manifestations of gods. These weren't pets, they were divine agents, tended with meticulous care. When they died, they received elaborate burials, mummified with fine linens, resins, and sometimes even tiny coffins of bronze or gold. The level of attention would make any modern pet owner whisper, "I gotta step up my game." You're greeted first by a priest who clearly spends most of his time here. His linen kilt is slightly furrier from cat hair than the average priest's wardrobe. He hands you a small bowl of chopped fish and gestures toward a shaded corner where an ibis stands, tall and elegant, its long curved beak gleaming in the light. The bird watches you with one eye, head tilted, as though evaluating your overall priestly worth. You offer a piece of fish. The ibis accepts with dignified calm, like a king receiving tribute. A fringed tidbit surfaces. Some ancient accounts describe priests interpreting divine messages from animal behavior, how a falcon turned its head, how an ibis stretched its wings, how a crocodile thrashed its tail. Did they truly believe animals conveyed divine will? Or were these symbolic gestures woven into ritual meaning? Scholars still tease apart the truth, unable to agree on how literal such animal oracles were. As you move along the walkway, a falcon screeches from its perch above, a sharp, piercing cry that makes your heartbeat jump. The falcon's handler, a priest with biceps that could probably bench press a granite block, nods at you. "He likes you," he says. The falcon fixes its gaze on you in a way that suggests the opposite, but you smile politely and keep walking. Next, you pass the cow enclosure, a serene space where a gentle priestess brushes the hide of a pale, creamy cow sacred to Hathor. The cow closes its eyes, leaning into the strokes with bliss. You help refill a trough with fresh water, and the cow nudges you softly with her nose. It feels like being kissed by a warm velvet pillow. Further along, the ambience shifts from peaceful to, let's call it tense. You hear splashing, deep, slow, ominous splashing. A crocodile pool. You stop at the edge, peering into the dark water where slow ripples betray something large moving beneath. A priest stands nearby with a bucket of fish and the exhausted expression of someone who has absolutely seen things. Serious things, bitey things. You step closer, and out glides a crocodile the size of a canoe. Its eyes break the surface, ancient, unblinking, and wholly unimpressed by your existence. The priest flicks a fish into the water. The crocodile snaps it with such explosive power that you jump back like someone set off a firecracker under your sandals. The priest chuckles. "First time?" You nod, trying to convince your spine to stop vibrating. Historians still argue whether these sacred animals genuinely received oracle consultations, or whether their reactions were interpreted symbolically by priests with deep ecological knowledge. In other words, were crocodile oracles divine prophecy, or just priests very good at reading reptile moods? You're leaning toward the latter. After all, anyone spending this much time around crocodiles would learn to interpret every twitch. You continue deeper into the precinct where the air is warmer and the ceiling lower. Here, smaller animals are kept. Cats for Bastet. possibly small baboons linked to Thoth, and the occasional snake kept in sealed jars for ritual purposes. A black and gold cat steps across your path tail high. You freeze, because everyone knows you don't interrupt a sacred cat. The cat pauses, sniffs your sandal, then rubs against your leg with the full entitlement of a creature who knows she is divine. You scratch behind her ears, and she purrs loudly, vibrating like a tiny furry temple drum. A young novice rushes to you breathless. "She chose you," he whispers. You blink. "Did she?" The boy nods solemnly, as if this is the most spiritually significant event of your entire priesthood. Maybe it is. Toward the rear of the precinct, a priest gestures for you to follow him to a small chamber used for interpreting omens. The room is simple: stone benches, 2 oil lamps, a flat surface dusted with very fine sand. He sets a small animal figurine in the center of the sand and waits. Then he blows gently so the loose grains swirl around it. Sometimes, he explains, priests watched for patterns in sand, marks made by animals, or movements near sacred objects to gather divine messages. It's subtle, quiet work. Not dramatic like lightning bolts or booming oracles, but thoughtful, serene. He invites you to sit. The air is still. The lamp flame flickers softly. You watch the tiny grains shift, forming ripples and curves. Nothing dramatic happens. No animal leaps forward to deliver revelations. No godly glow fills the chamber. But you feel something nonetheless. An intimacy with nature, with silence, with the breathing rhythm of the temple. Sometimes revelation doesn't roar. Sometimes it hums. You rise, bow gently, and step back into the sunlit courtyard. The animals continue their rhythms, birds calling, cats grooming, crocodiles lurking, cows dozing. Life here feels eternal, cyclical, woven into the temple's heartbeat. As you walk on, a tiny thought drifts through your mind. Being a priest doesn't always mean commanding the divine. Sometimes it means feeding an ibis, avoiding a crocodile, and accepting the blessing of a cat who thinks she owns the temple. Which, to be fair, she probably does. You leave the animal precinct with a lingering sense of wonder, part awe, part relief that the crocodile didn't decide you looked like a mid-morning snack, and step back into the main artery of temple corridors. The air here is busier, warmer, brighter. It feels as if the entire structure is inhaling in preparation for something grand. And it is. Because now you're heading toward the most vibrant, lively, utterly exhausting part of priestly life. Festival preparations. Egyptian temples weren't all hush and incense and scholarly whispers. A huge part of their yearly rhythm involved massive public ceremonies, processions, parades, boat rituals, dancing, chanting, feasting, offerings, and enough organization to make a modern event planner weep with respect. And these festivals didn't happen once a year. Try dozens, sometimes dozens in a month, which means someone has to prepare for them. And today, that someone is you. You turn a corner and immediately nearly collide with 2 priests carrying a gilded pole between them. They shuffle past with the solemn focus of men transporting something that must never ever hit a wall. A 3rd priest follows behind them, holding a basket of lotus petals. He is shedding them with every frustrated exhale. "Stop dropping the petals," someone shouts. "I'm not dropping them," he snaps. "They're escaping." You continue forward into a wide courtyard already buzzing with activity. Lamps hang from tall stands. Rolls of linen unfurl across the floor. Carpenters polish the wooden edges of a ceremonial bark, the small gilded boat-shaped shrine that will carry the god's statue through the city. Painters put finishing touches on bright banners depicting lotus flowers, falcons and protective symbols. Scribes run around checking lists, because apparently even ancient priests had spreadsheets. A mainstream historical fact. Egyptian festivals were enormous civic events involving thousands of participants. The Opet festival in Thebes, for example, featured the god Amun's statue being carried from Karnak to Luxor in a massive procession lasting days. Temples coordinated everything: music, offerings, route planning, crowd control, and all the sacred objects used along the way. Behind the grandeur was endless preparation. Exactly like this. A senior festival overseer approaches you with the expression of a man who hasn't sat down since last year's festival. He hands you a roll of linen decorated with painted stars. "Take this to the canopy builders," he says. and try not to step on anything sacred on the way. You look down, everything looks sacred. You lift your feet higher than necessary as you cross the courtyard. At the canopy station, several priests are constructing a framework of poles and beams. When draped with linen, it will form a portable canopy carried above the god's bark during the procession. You hand them the starry cloth. One priest unfurls it with a careful flourish, the stars shimmering in the morning light. "Good," he says. "The heavens will look generous this year." A fringe tidbit pops into your mind. Some festival canopies were decorated according to astronomical themes: constellations, heavenly boats, solar symbols. Scholars debate whether the pattern served ritual significance or just artistic inspiration. Either way, the canopy in front of you looks like the Milky Way got stitched into fabric. You're pulled next toward the music rehearsal zone, but not the gentle warm-up chants you heard earlier. Oh no, festival bands are louder, faster, wilder. You step into the space and are immediately hit with the rhythmic thunder of frame drums, the metallic rattle of sistrums, the deep resonant boom of ceremonial drums that vibrate through your chest. A musician thrusts a clapper into your hand. "Here," he shouts over the noise. "Follow the beat." He demonstrates a pattern. Clap, clap, boom, clap, boom, boom. You attempt it. You fail. You attempt again. You fail less. By the third try, you vaguely resemble someone keeping rhythm on purpose. The leader nods at you. Better. You beam with pride until he adds, "For someone clearly tone-adjacent." Ouch! You escape the music zone and find yourself face-to-face with a troupe of dancers practicing the steps for tomorrow's procession. Their movements flow like water, arms rising and falling, feet gliding in slow arcs. Their linen dresses and kilts flutter with each motion. You try one step and nearly trip over your own enthusiasm. A dancer steadies you, smiling. "Don't worry. It took me 3 years to stop looking like a startled ostrich." Next, you're summoned to help with the offerings. A mountain of jars, baskets, fruits, breads, oils, and flowers towers before you. Priests weave through it like bees in a hive, selecting items for the god's traveling feast. You help arrange trays of figs and melons, each piece placed with ritual precision. You pour honey into small bowls, the thick golden stream catching the light like molten sunlight. Historians still argue whether the portable festival offerings had purely symbolic purposes, or whether people consumed parts of them along the route. Records show both possibilities, leaving scholars debating logistics like, did citizens snack on ritual grapes? Honestly, looking at the figs right now, you could be persuaded. From offerings, you're sent to the transport team responsible for carrying the bark itself. You inspect the wooden support beams polished to a glow. The bark gleams with gold leaf, its curved prow shaped like a serpent, its canopy posts waiting for the starry fabric. You lay your hand on the smooth wood and feel a tiny shiver. Not fear, just awareness. Tomorrow this object will move through a sea of people, all waiting to glimpse the god. A young priest fiddles with a rope tying the canopy poles. He frowns, muttering calculations. You step in to help, tightening knots with fingers that still remember tying linen bundles in the House of Life. He sighs gratefully. "If this falls during the procession," he says, "I'm transferring to a quieter temple." You laugh. He's only half joking. Finally, as the sun tips past midday, the overseer claps his hands, signaling a rest. The courtyard quiets, not silent, but softer. You sit on a low stone bench, wiping sweat from your brow. Your linen kilt is dusty. Your hands smell faintly of honey, linen, and paint. Around you, priests slump against walls, sipping water, stretching sore muscles, humming bits of music from rehearsal. And as you look around at the mountain of work still to be done, you feel surprisingly energized. Festival days are exhausting, yes, but they're also the moments when the temple breathes out into the world, when gods and people meet, when the city transforms, when devotion becomes movement, color, sound. You glance at the bark again, gleaming patiently in the sun. Tomorrow, this quiet courtyard will explode into life. But for now, there's a calm before the sacred storm. You step out of the courtyard just as the festival preparations begin to wind down for the afternoon. The air is still buzzing with leftover energy. Dancers stretching their legs, musicians shaking out their wrists, scribes complaining quietly about having to rewrite the same checklist 3 times because someone spilled beer on it. but you're now being pulled toward a different rhythm entirely. A slower one. A heavier one. You're heading into the temple at night. Not nighttime outside. Egyptian sun is still blazing overhead. But inside the deepest halls, the temple keeps its own hours, its own darkness, its own heartbeat. And now it's time to help transition the complex toward evening. The phase when the public world grows distant and the temple shrinks inward, its corridors cooling, its sounds softening, its shadows stretching long and patient. You walk through a long passageway, and with each step, sunlight thins until it's gone entirely. Lamps take its place, tiny, flickering flames floating in pools of oil, casting warm, amber halos on the stone walls. The temperature drops noticeably. The air grows thicker. It's a different temple now, quieter, still, a little eerie if you're honest. This isn't the vibrant daytime machine of chanting, crafting, teaching, healing, tallying, and preparing. This is the inner soul of the temple, the version that only priests ever see after hours. A mainstream historical fact comes to mind. Egyptian temples never fully slept. Priests performed certain duties at night: guarding, maintaining lamps, reciting protective hymns, monitoring sacred animals, and keeping an eye on the sanctuary. Night held both danger and holiness in Egyptian symbolism. It was the realm of darkness, where the sun god Ra travelled through the underworld fighting chaos. Priests mirrored this cosmic journey by ensuring the temple remained ordered even in the shadows. You hear soft footsteps ahead. A night shift priest rounds the corner, nods at you, and hands you a small clay lamp. The flame dances lightly as you hold it. "Sanctuary check," he murmurs. "Come with me." You follow him deeper, and the corridor presses in with intentional closeness. Your lamp casts long, slow-moving shadows that slither across the carved scenes on the walls. Kings making offerings, gods standing tall, protective deities spreading wings over the world. By day, they're just images. By lamplight, they feel alive. You enter a side chamber first, the place where priests store ritual tools. The shelves glint faintly. Bronze knives, never sharp enough to harm, always symbolic. Bowls carved from alabaster, incense burners shaped like cobras, wooden wands decorated with protective deities. You use your lamp to inspect each one, making sure none are out of place. They rarely are, but ritual requires checking. Night demands it. As your lamplight grazes the surface of a bronze mirror, the reflection catches you off guard, your face stretched long in the curved surface, eyes dark, forehead glistening slightly. You blink, laugh softly under your breath. You look like a sleep-deprived ghost who moonlights as a priest. Next, you're led toward the animal chambers again, but nighttime changes those too. The animals are quieter now. The ibis rests with its head tucked under a wing. The cows sleep curled gently in their enclosure. The cats prowl softly, padding through shadows like tiny guardians. The crocodile pool, however, is unsettlingly silent. The night priest shines his lamp over the water. Nothing moves. "Oh, he's down there," the priest mutters. "He always lurks deeper at night. I think he enjoys being mysterious." You nod solemnly, because a crocodile with a flair for dramatic timing sounds exactly correct. You continue inward. The deeper you go, the darker it gets, until your lamp feels like the only point anchoring you to the physical world. The scent changes too. Less incense, more stone, older air, as though you're walking through centuries condensed. At one point you pass a doorway where two priests sit cross-legged, facing each other in silence. Between them burns a single brazier, emitting thin coils of blue smoke. Nightly hymns, your companion whispers. Protective recitations keeps Isfet out. Isfet, chaos, disorder, the cosmic opposite of Mayat. You watch for a moment as one priest inhales slowly, then exhales a quiet chant that vibrates through the room like a distant echo of thunder. The other priest responds with a line of equal softness, back and forth, like the world's oldest call and response meditation. A fringe tidbit comes to mind. Some texts suggest that certain protective rituals were only effective if performed after sunset, when the boundary between worlds thinned. Scholars debate whether this is literal or symbolic. Was night truly dangerous? Or was it simply theologically charged? You get the sense that for ancient priests, symbolism and reality were often the same thing. You and your partner continue toward the heart of the temple. The sanctuary. The door remains sealed overnight and you will not open it now, but you must check its seals, its hinges, its purity marks. You approach slowly, reverently. The torchlight glances across the golden lintel, making the carved eyes of protective deities flicker briefly as though winking. You press your hand gently against the door. It is cool, solid, calm. The god sleeps again, not literally, but ritually. The temple breathes in, you breathe out. The night priest nods. Good. Then he hands you a small parchment bearing a series of nightly invocations. He gestures for you to read. Your voice, quiet at first, begins to stretch into the chamber. Your chant is slow, steady, a soft weave of sound that threads through the shadow-heavy hallways like silk. The words reference light, rebirth, protection, the cyclical journey of Ra through the underworld. As you speak, something shifts inside you. Not supernatural, just grounded, like aligning with a rhythm older than the walls around you. You finish. The priest nods again, this time with a hint of satisfaction. You're getting good at this. You smile, the quiet kind that glows rather than beams. On the way back, you light a few lamps that have grown dim. The flames puff gently, catching the wick, warming the air. You pass the musician's room, now empty, the benches stacked neatly. You pass the house of life behind its closed doors. You pass the training hall, where abandoned reed pens lie waiting for tomorrow's lessons. By the time you reach the outer corridor, the last traces of daylight have faded from the entry slats. The temple is fully in its nighttime form now, cool, reverent, and humming with quiet duty. You take one more slow breath. Night belongs to the gods, but you are one of the guardians who keeps the darkness orderly, the lamps lit, and the silence sacred. And in this moment, with your small lamp glowing like a warm heartbeat in your palm, you feel deeply, calmly, quietly, part of something vast. The temple feels heavier now, settled, wrapped in its evening stillness, but your duties aren't done, not even close. Because now you're being led somewhere few priests ever enter without permission, somewhere more secretive than the sanctuary itself, a place with a reputation whispered about even among the priesthood, the restricted chambers. You follow a senior priest through a narrow hallway whose ceiling lowers just slightly, enough to make you instinctively duck. The air grows cooler, denser, like the stone itself is holding its breath. Lamps here burn lower, their flames little more than trembling pinpoints of light. At the end of the passage stands a heavy wooden door bound with copper and marked with protective symbols, ankhs, eyes, serpents, and geometric seals arranged with mathematical precision. The senior priest lifts a small key carved from ebony, impossibly smooth, and inserts it into a hidden recess. The lock clicks softly, a sound so quiet you barely hear it, but the temple seems to notice. "Stay close," he says. You nod. Even your heartbeat quiets. When the door opens, the room beyond breathes cold air over your skin. The chamber is small, stone-lined, and dimly lit. Shelves carved directly into the walls hold objects wrapped in linen, locked in wooden boxes, or displayed on stands with reverent isolation. The space smells like old papyrus, cooled incense, and dust that hasn't moved in decades. This is where the temple keeps the dangerous things. A mainstream historical fact arises in your mind. Certain rituals required specialized items, wands, knives, figurines, scrolls, that were considered too potent or too sacred for general use. They were kept in restricted rooms accessible only to high-ranking priests. These weren't weapons. They were symbols, magical tools, cosmic instruments, some recorded to cure, some to banish, some to protect the king himself. The senior priest moves first to a set of wooden boxes stacked neatly on the lower shelf. He kneels and opens one, revealing a gleaming bronze ritual knife. Not sharp, but engraved with intricate protective spells and crowned with the head of a jackal. You feel its weight in the air. Not physical weight, symbolic weight, as if even without a blade it could cut through something unseen. He closes the box carefully. Most of these are only used during eclipses, he murmurs, or certain emergencies. You decide not to ask what qualifies as an emergency. Next, he gestures toward a wrapped bundle on a higher shelf. He unties the linen with slow precision, revealing a wand made from carved ivory, curved like a crescent moon, and decorated with images of protective goddesses, Taweret, Bez, Hathor. These birth wands, were used in rituals for both childbirth and warding off malevolent forces. The ivory is warm to the touch, despite the chill of the room. You don't pick it up, but you feel its presence like a warm pulse. A fringed tidbit unfurls in your memory. Some of these wands were found buried in the sand far from temples, as if their owners feared they were too powerful to keep but too sacred to destroy. Historians still debate whether they belong to priests, midwives, or magical specialists. The truth may have been all three. The line between magic and religion in ancient Egypt was thinner than papyrus. The senior priest now moves toward the back of the chamber, where a small stone box rests alone on a raised platform. He kneels again, and this time, his movements slow even more. He gestures for you to stay a respectful distance. You do. He opens the box. Inside is a scroll wrapped in red linen. Your breath catches. Red linen means danger, secrecy, chaos containment. You've seen references in the House of Life to restricted texts, spells dealing with the underworld, rituals too potent for daily use, incantations requiring precise vocalization lest they, well, misbehave. The priest doesn't unwrap it. He simply lets the sight of it settle into the room like a silent warning. This, he says very softly, is only read during the darkest nights, during eclipses, during omens, and only by the high priest. You swallow. 1,000 questions flutter in your mind like panicked butterflies, but one rises above the rest. What does it do? He gives a faint smile. Historians still argue. You blink. Historians? Yes, he says. Future priests, scribes, scholars. They'll argue about everything in here, which is good. Mystery is sacred. You nod slowly. Somehow that feels true. The priest closes the box, rewraps the red linen and places it back gently, as though setting down a sleeping serpent. Then he leads you to the opposite wall. Here, an assortment of ritual figurines sits on their own carved platform. Some are wooden, others stone or faience. One depicts a lion-headed goddess brandishing knives. Another shows a coiled serpent beneath protective spells. A third is just an unassuming block of limestone with symbols carved so small you can barely see them unless you lean in close. You do. Mistake. The symbols aren't decorative. They seem to twist slightly as your eyes trace them. Optical illusion or something else. You blink hard, pull back, and the priest chuckles quietly. Yes, he says. Some objects are designed to unsettle the mind. Keeps chaos away by reminding it we can be strange too. You shiver, not from fear, more from awe. One final item rests on a pedestal at the center of the room. A staff topped with a carved papyrus umbel. It's beautiful, elegant, harmless looking. But the priest's tone changes when he speaks of it. This staff, he says, is used only when the sanctuary's purity is compromised, when an omen appears, when the god must be reassured. You resist the urge to ask how often that happens. He steps back, satisfied with the inspection. Everything is in order, he says, as it should be. But as you turn toward the door, something nudges your awareness. A whispering sensation. Not a sound, just the faint, uncanny feeling of being observed. You glance back. The items on the shelves are still, silent, but somehow awake. You step through the door, and the priest locks it behind you. The click echoes sharply in the corridor. As you walk away, a lingering thought curls in your mind like smoke. There are parts of priesthood you can prepare for, and there are parts you simply have to respect. The restricted chambers fall firmly into the second category. You walk away from the restricted chamber with your pulse still humming, as if the lingering presence of all those secretive objects is following a few steps behind you. But the corridor ahead grows warmer, brighter, and you quickly sense another shift. Not the comforting domesticity of the workshops, not the mystic hush of the sanctuary, not the eerie coolness of the night duties. This shift is political. Subtle at first. A few extra scribes hurrying past, a scribe clutching a bundle of scrolls looking slightly panicked, a priest smoothing his linen kilt in a way that suggests he's bracing for a meeting, and the tone of voices drifting through the air, soft, controlled, careful, the sound of negotiations, because now you're stepping into one of the least talked about corners of temple life, the world behind the incense, where priests and officials perform the ancient equivalent of bureaucracy wrestling. A place where the god's will meets human agendas, and trust me, humans always bring plenty of those. The corridor opens into a spacious hall you haven't visited yet. Not the grand hyper-style hall used for public ceremony, but a quieter chamber lined with benches and low tables. Several priests sit on one side, scrolls unfurled before them. Across from them are government scribes, local officials, tax collectors, and one man wearing enough jewellery to signal, "Yes, I absolutely work for the palace." The air is thick, not with incense, but with tension. A mainstream historical fact surfaces effortlessly. Temples were not separate from political life. They owned land, collected taxes in kind, oversaw huge estates, and held influence in almost every facet of society. The relationship between temple and state was complex, cooperative, competitive, respectful, strained, sometimes all at once. Pharaohs needed the temple's religious authority, temples needed the state's protection and resources. So meetings like this happened constantly. Quiet negotiations in shadowed halls about land boundaries, labour allotments, offerings budgets, festival routes, or who gets to use which granary. A priest waves you over, handing you a jar of water to distribute to the attendees. You move through the room, placing small cups before the scribes and priests. As you work, you overhear snippets of conversation. "We cannot allocate 50 workers for the construction crew," one official murmurs. "The god requires it," a priest responds. Calm, firm, unyielding. A scribe mutters about grain shortages. Another counters with lists showing previous year surpluses. Someone nearby sighs dramatically. You set a cup down, your movements quiet as a shadow. When you reach the palace representative, he barely looks up, just nods with a calculated smile. You instantly dislike him, though you don't know why. Maybe it's the jewellery, or maybe it's the way he says, "We'll see," after every request like it's an art form. You back away, positioning yourself near a corner to observe. On the far table sit several open papyri, lists of festival supplies, predictions of grain yields, petitions from villages requesting priestly blessings for harvest, and the inevitable taxes due to the temple. A scribe is scribbling corrections so fast his reed pen squeaks. Another priest quietly reorganizes a stack of wooden tablets, muttering under his breath like a man who knows he'll be blamed whether things go well or badly. A fringe tidbit floats into your mind. Some temples kept double ledgers, one official copy for the state and one private copy for internal temple use. Scholars still argue whether this was careful backup management or very ancient creative accounting. You glance around the room and can absolutely believe both theories. A heated discussion rises at the centre table. The lead official objects to the temple's request for additional farmland labourers during planting season. The high-ranking priest counters by invoking ritual necessity, how specific days require precise offerings, how the cosmic cycle depends on the temple functioning properly. The official pushes back, citing shortages. The priest counters again with theological weight so dense you can practically feel it. You lean in slightly. This is not argument, this is strategy. For every practical objection, the priests use theology. For every theological claim, officials respond with logistics. Neither side is wrong. Neither side relents easily. It's a dance older than the walls around you. Historians still argue over the true balance of power here. Some say temples held enormous autonomy, using religion as leverage. Others say the pharaohs controlled temples tightly, ensuring no priesthood grew too powerful. In reality, you see it now. Negotiation. Give and take. Soft pressure. Understanding built from necessity more than affection. One priest catches your eye and gestures subtly for you to bring a scroll from a nearby alcove. You retrieve it. The papyrus is heavy, thick, written in clear hieratic script. When he unfurls it, the room quiets slightly. It's a record of previous land decrees. He points at lines with calm authority. "The king granted this to the god 3 generations ago," he says. "We ask only what has already been given. Checkmate. For now." The officials shift uncomfortably. A few nod, a few scowl. One scribe begins recalculating figures at light speed. Meanwhile, smaller conversations bloom around the room. Priests discussing festival routes with guards. Scribes negotiating supply shipments. A junior official nervously asking a priest to bless his wife's pregnancy. Another priest whispering an apology for losing a receipt that absolutely should have been archived. You realize something strange. This room feels more human than cosmic. Less about gods, more about the people who serve them. And yet, the gods are everywhere here too, in the way the priests invoke Mayat, cosmic order, as the ultimate argument, in how officials lower their voices when speaking of oaths taken in the presence of the divine, in how every discussion circles back not to wealth, but to maintaining the world's balance through temple operation. Eventually the senior priest stands, everyone quiets. He doesn't raise his voice, he doesn't gesture dramatically, he simply speaks. The temple will perform its duties, the god will receive what is needed, the people will be served, and the land will be fruitful. It's not a demand, it's a promise, and somehow the room exhales, negotiations soften, agreements solidify. One official begins drafting a new decree. A scribe rubs his temples but continues writing. The palace representative sighs and signs off on something he clearly doesn't want to, but knows refusing would cause trouble. Within minutes, the tone shifts from tension to fatigue. The senior priest turns to you. "Good," he says quietly. "You should see this part too. The temple is not only rituals, it is responsibility." You nod. Because now you understand. Incense and purity are one thing. But someone has to keep the lights on, the granaries stocked, the festivals running, the workers fed. Someone has to speak for the god in a world full of competing needs. And that someone is the priesthood. You walk out of the hall with the senior priest, leaving behind murmured voices and half-empty cups. The political dance continues without you, but its echoes follow you down the corridor like long, tired breaths. Behind every sacred ritual lies a negotiation. Behind every temple wall lies 1,000 conversations, and behind every divine act lies a very human effort. You leave the negotiation hall with your thoughts still echoing from all the murmured deals, the delicate balancing acts, the careful yes but no but maybe phrases. Politics sticks to the skin in a way incense never quite does. You shake it off as you walk, letting the corridor's cooler air settle your mind again. But you're not heading toward rest. Your next destination pulls you into one of the strangest, most otherworldly aspects of temple life. One that blends healing, prophecy, dreaming, psychology, and divine communication in ways both beautiful and unsettling. The incubation chambers, also known as the oracular sleep rooms. You turn down a narrow passageway lit with soft lamps, their glow dimmer than usual. Here, the air is thick with fragrant herbs, chamomile, mint, crushed lotus, and something earthy you can't identify. The corridor grows quieter with each step until the only sound is the whisper of your feet on the stone. You're entering a place where people come not for offerings or medicine, but for answers that can only be found in dreams. The chamber opens before you like a deep inhale, a long hall lined with low stone beds, each topped with woven mats and fine linen. The ceiling is painted dark blue, speckled, with stars. Lamps hang low, giving everything a twilight glow. It feels neither night nor day, a suspended moment where the waking world loosens its grip. A mainstream historical fact comes immediately to mind. Sleep temples existed in various ancient cultures, and Egypt had its own versions. People would sleep inside sacred precincts to receive dreams believed to be sent by gods, visions offering healing, guidance, omens, or answers to personal dilemmas. Priests supervised these sleep rituals, interpreted the dreams, and sometimes even invoked the gods through chants before the sleepers drifted off. You're greeted by a priest whose voice is so soft and soothing, it could put a falcon to sleep. "You're here to assist," he whispers. You nod. He gestures you forward. You pass several people already preparing for their divine sleep. A woman kneels beside a mat, whispering a prayer for fertility. A young man clutches a small amulet of Thoth, asking for clarity about a dispute with his brother. An elderly man sits silently with his hands folded, eyes closed, breathing deep, the look of someone seeking closure rather than guidance. You kneel beside a basket of ritual items, small jars of herbal oils, bowls of cool water, bundles of dried lotus petals. The priest hands you a clay cup. "Start with him," he says, pointing toward the man seeking family guidance. You move gently, offering the cup. "Drink," you whisper. The water is infused with mild herbs, not to knock anyone out but to calm their heart, steady their breath. He sips, nods, lies down, and pulls a linen cloth over his chest. A fringe tidbit flickers in your memory. Some ancient texts describe priests using subtle sensory cues, scents, chants, gentle touches, to guide dream imagery. Not exactly dream manipulation, but a kind of spiritual suggestion. Scholars still debate whether this was psychological insight or pure ritual. Standing here, watching the man's breath settle into a slow rhythm, you suspect it was both. You move toward the next sleeper. A young woman sits rigidly, twisting the corner of her linen shawl between her fingers. She looks terrified. You sit beside her. "What troubles you?" "My mother," she whispers. "She is ill. I want to know if she'll recover." You feel something soften in your chest. "Rest," you say. "Let your dreams speak." You offer her a light touch of lotus oil on her temples, not for magic, but for peace. She exhales shakily, then lies down. You adjust her shawl so it rests comfortably along her arms. Next, you assist with the ritual preparation of the chamber itself. The lead priest begins reciting a soft chant to Imhotep, the deified architect and healer known for wisdom and dreams. His voice ripples through the room like warm waves. Another priest sprinkles powdered herbs over a small brazier. The smoke rises in gentle spirals, its scent warm and slightly sweet. The sleepers shift, sigh, begin drifting. One priest signals you to dim a few lamps. You do so, careful not to extinguish too many. The room must hover in twilight, bright enough to feel safe, dark enough to welcome visions. Historians still argue whether dream incubation rituals were primarily religious or proto-psychological. Some scholars believe priests interpreted symbols like early therapists, guiding people through emotional struggles. Others insist dreams were treated as literal divine messages. Watching the ritual now, you see shades of both, faith woven with human need. A man near the far wall stirs and murmurs. You approach quietly. His breathing is uneven, caught between waking and dreaming. You touch his shoulder gently. "Peace," you whisper. His breath slows. He drifts deeper. You pause for a moment, taking in the room. The sleepers lie like islands in a soft sea of lamplight. Some breathe evenly, some twitch lightly, some clutch their amulets as though anchoring themselves to the divine. A soft joke sneaks into your mind. You're basically an ancient sleep technician, but the room's atmosphere is too tender for you to smile fully at the thought. The lead priest approaches you. "Now," he says quietly, "we observe." You take a seat along the wall next to him, watching, listening. Sometimes the dreams come quietly, with only a whisper or sigh. Sometimes the sleeper speaks in fragments. Sometimes they sit upright mid-dream, eyes wide but unseeing, and you gently guide them back down. Hours pass in this hushed sacred twilight. And then, phase 2, interpretation. One by one, the sleepers awaken. Some look peaceful, some confused, some emotional, eyes shining with unshed tears. The man seeking guidance for his dispute sits up first. You kneel beside him. "What did you see?" He describes a river splitting into two currents, then merging again downstream. You nod slowly. Then reconciliation will come, but after distance. He breathes out, relief and sadness mingling. Next, the young woman with the ill mother. Her voice trembles. "I dreamt of a garden with two paths, one bright, one dark. My mother walked the bright one. The lead priest touches her hand. Then she will recover." Tears spill quietly down her cheeks, but they're tears of joy. Your interpretations aren't guesswork. You're following patterns codified over generations, symbols preserved in the house of life. Water means change. Gardens mean renewal. Two paths represent divergence and destiny. The dream language feels alive. When all dreams are shared and interpreted, the room brightens slightly as a few lamps are turned up. The sleepers rise slowly, walking out with softened faces, lighter steps. As the chamber empties, you help extinguish the last of the incense and fold the linen mats. The chamber falls quiet again, but the echoes of dreams linger like faint ripples on a still pool. You walk out with the lead priest, who says softly, "People think our power is in rituals, chants, statues." He glances back into the dim chamber. But sometimes it lives in the human heart, when it dares to listen to itself. You follow him back into the temple's warm corridors, feeling the weight and softness of that truth. Dreams, you realize, are not just visions, they're bridges. And tonight you helped build them. You step out of the dream chamber with your mind still floating somewhere between the waking world and whatever soft, symbolic realm the sleepers just visited. The air in the corridor feels sharper now, cleaner, brighter, like dipping your senses back into cold water after drifting through warm mist. You inhale and immediately detect something familiar. Natron. Oh no! You're heading into purification duty again. Yes, again. Because if there is one universal truth about being an Egyptian priest, it's this. You're never done being clean. Never. Forget modern hygiene routines. Priests lived by purification rules so strict they'd make a spa manager whisper, "Are you okay?" The corridor widens into a cool, dim space lined with shallow basins carved from polished limestone. Lamps flicker along the walls, their light reflecting off water surfaces with a soft shimmer. A priest is already waiting, arms folded, giving you the kind of look that says, "You smell too human for this next ritual, fix it." You swallow. Time to face the taboos. A mainstream historical fact drifts through your mind. Egyptian priests had extensive purity laws. These range from simple washings to dietary restrictions to abstaining from certain activities on ritual days. Some temple texts specify 4 purification baths per day. Others describe abstinence periods, nail trimming schedules, and extremely precise shaving routines. Priestly life wasn't glamorous. It was a cycle of scrubbing, praying, repeating. You step toward the closest basin, its water still and dark. The priest hands you a scoop of natron, coarse, white, slightly alkaline. You sprinkle it over the water. It hisses faintly as it dissolves, sending up a crisp, mineral scent. You splash the mixture over your arms, chest, face. It prickles against your skin, especially in places still irritated from the morning's shaving. Your companion priest watches you with the intensity of a man guarding cosmic order armed only with a judgmental gaze. You try not to flinch. He nods. Barely. Next comes the mouthwash. Yes, the infamous natron rinse. You take a small sip of the solution, swish it, and immediately regret every decision that led you here. It tastes like salty sand mixed with a hint of regret. You gag quietly but manage not to spit it out prematurely. The supervising priest actually smiles, which somehow feels more concerning than if he'd frowned. A fringed tidbit bubbles up. Some ancient medical texts describe natron being used not just for purification, but for wound cleaning, deodorizing, and even tooth care. Scholars debate whether priests use the same formula as the embalmers, who use natron extensively for mummification. You very sincerely hope the mixture you just swished is not embalmer grade. You rinse your hands again, then step onto a low mat to dry. The priest hands you fresh linen, soft, newly woven, smelling faintly of lotus and sunshine. Changing clothes is part of the cycle too. Impurity clings to garments like dust. Linen, however, absorbs purity like a sponge. As you dress, 2 younger novices shuffle in looking guilty. The supervising priest raises an eyebrow and asks, "Which taboo did you break?" The first stammers something about stepping into the temple courtyard before washing his hands. The second admits he accidentally ate a fish that was on the avoid today list due to a ritual alignment schedule. You step aside as they receive their scolding. The supervising priest lectures them on purity cycles, cosmic harmony, and the dangers of careless behavior. The novices nod rapidly, heads bobbing like startled ibises. You bite the inside of your cheek to stop yourself from smiling. Next comes the incense fumigation. A priest lights a small block of fragrant resin. Smoke blooms slowly, curling around your arms, shoulders, and head. You inhale the scent, frankincense with a hint of myrrh, and feel something in your chest loosen. The smoke wraps you in a warm, invisible shawl. A gentle joke tugs at your thoughts. If Egyptian priests had a sacred cologne, this would be it. Eau de Divinorum smells like God-approved smoke and a hint of cosmic anti-chaos. A tall priest approaches now holding a small tablet inscribed with purity declarations. "Recite," he instructs. You speak the words softly, affirmations of ritual cleanliness, statements of intent, promises to maintain ma'at through your conduct. The phrases are ancient, repetitive, soothing. By the time you finish, your voice feels calmer, steadier, anchored. Historians still argue whether purity laws were more symbolic, more hygienic, or more social in function. Some point to the practical benefits. Washing reduced disease. Others emphasize their theological weight, purity as a barrier against chaos. Still others argue they serve to maintain discipline and priestly identity. Watching the novices tremble and the supervising priest glow with righteous authority, you suspect all of the above. The purification cycle continues with a strange but oddly grounding task: trimming nails. A priest carefully clips yours. Yes, someone else trims your nails, because even that act must be ritually precise. Any stray bit of trimmed nail is gathered and placed into a small clay pot. Nothing is left behind. Everything has meaning. Finally, you finish the cycle with a symbolic gesture, brushing your hands over a carved hieroglyph of the Ankh and touching your forehead lightly. Life renewed. Order restored. The supervising priest dismisses you with a nod of approval, a rare honor, and you step back into the corridor feeling lighter, cleaner, and surprisingly refreshed. The stone walls seem a shade brighter. The air feels gentler on your skin. Even your sandals seem more comfortable, though you're not certain if that's divine intervention or just improved mood. But as you walk deeper into the corridor, you feel, not notice, but feel, the invisible net of taboos closing in again. No stepping into the sanctuary unprepared, no eating certain foods until sunset, no touching sacred items without washing, no entering certain passages unless ritually authorized. Priestly life is a maze of do's and don'ts, marked by invisible threads only the trained can see. You pause, exhale, and realize something. Ritual purity isn't just about cleanliness, it's about attention, intention, awareness, the discipline to live each moment with care. And as tiring as it is, you feel yourself aligning again, though you silently promise your mouth it won't taste natron again for at least a few hours. You leave the purification chamber feeling lighter, clean in a way that's more mental than physical, as though someone pressed a reset button inside your skull. But before you can fully enjoy this brief sensation of cosmic alignment, another priest approaches, his expression serious but not urgent. He gestures down a dim hallway. "It's time," he murmurs. "We prepare the god for night." Ah, the final closing rituals. If the morning awakening was like tending to a divine VIP's sunrise routine, this is the sacred bedtime ceremony, equal parts reverence, routine, and gentle ritual choreography. And it is crucial. The god cannot be left awake overnight, not ritually. The universe has rules, and the priesthood is here to follow them one precise step at a time. You follow the priest through the darkening halls, your sandals whispering against cool stone. The air thins, warms slightly, and takes on that unmistakable scent of evening incense, deep, woody, lingering. The torches burn lower now, shadows stretching like long fingers across the carved walls. You recognize the route, back toward the sanctuary, but entering through a different corridor reserved for night rites. You pause at the final junction. The senior priest stands waiting, hands clasped, eyes calm. He nods once. "Let's begin." You inhale slowly and step forward. The sanctuary doors stand before you once again. Two tall wooden panels reinforced with golden strips, the protective eyes of Horus painted across their upper surfaces. They seem to watch you, silent but attentive. A lamp burns nearby in a niche, its flame small but steady. A mainstream historical fact. In Egyptian temples, the cult statue was sealed inside the sanctuary at night. Priests performed a ritual, putting to bed, wrapping the god in fresh linens, offering soothing incense, closing the shrine, and sealing the doors with clay or ropes. This wasn't superstition, it was cosmology. As the sun god travelled through the underworld at night, the gods in the temple rested as well. Their withdrawal echoed the cosmic cycle. The senior priest begins the opening chant, soft, low, steady. You join on the second line, your voice blending with his until the sound vibrates gently through the stone. The chant is not as grand as the dawn hymns, it is quieter, more intimate, like a lullaby for something ancient and eternal. The doors creak open just a fraction, enough for you to slip inside. The sanctuary glows faintly, lamps arranged like constellations around the gilded shrine. The statue sits calmly, adorned from the morning ritual, fresh linens, jewelry gleaming, face serene and unchanging. It feels softer now, not less powerful, just more at rest. as though the temple itself exhales when night comes. You and the other priests move slowly, deliberately. First comes gentle cleansing, wiping away the day's incense residue, brushing stray grains of dust from the pedestal, adjusting the jewelry so it lies straight. You use the feather whisk again, the soft bristles whispering against gold surfaces like the wings of a moth. Then the offerings. Not the full banquet of the morning, but a simple selection. Bread, water, a small bowl of lotus petals. It's symbolic, a gesture of care. The scent of the lotus drifts upward, sweet, calming, a floral echo of twilight. A fringed tidbit floats into your mind. Some ancient texts claim specific lullaby-like hymns were reserved for this moment, invoking protective deities to guard the god's shrine during the long night. Scholars still debate whether these were literal ceremonial songs or metaphorical references to maintaining purity. Standing here now, you think, why not both? Next comes the rewrapping. The senior priest lifts a new linen mantle, thin, pristine, cool to the touch. You help drape it over the statue's shoulders, smoothing the folds. The cloth rustles softly, settling like a gentle cloud. There is no haste. Every movement is reverent. Then the most important gesture, closing the shrine itself. You and two other priests step forward. You lift the small golden doors on the shrine cabinet and swing them shut. The click is soft but final. The world on the other side, the divine space, withdraws behind the gleaming panels. You feel it like a shift in the air. The room grows quieter, heavier. The senior priest seals the cabinet with a narrow cord dyed red, symbolic protection, and presses a small clay seal over the knot. The clay chills quickly in the cool air. The seal bears a tiny impression of a hieroglyphic sign meaning protected. When he lifts his finger away, the impression remains crisp, ready to greet the morning. Historians still argue whether these seals were purely symbolic or whether they served as a method of maintaining ritual integrity and accountability. If someone broke the seal overnight, it was noticeable. Some believe the seals held magical power. Others see them as ancient temple security protocols. Watching it now, you sense both intentions woven together. The final offering of incense is lit, just a pinch of resin that burns with a soft, sweet note. The smoke rises gently toward the ceiling and disperses into the dimness. You watch it dissolve into the air like a final exhale of the day. The senior priest nods at you. "Lamp," he whispers. You lift the small bronze lamp from its niche, step forward, and place it on its pedestal near the shrine. This lamp will burn all night, its flame representing the eternal presence of the divine, even behind the sealed doors. The ceremony ends with a final prayer, soft, steady, almost sleepy. You speak it in unison with the others. "May you rest in peace, Great One. May the night carry you safely. May dawn return your light to us." Your voice barely rises above a whisper, yet the room seems to resonate with it. Then the priests back away step by step, never, turning their backs on the shrine until they reach the door. The sanctuary darkens behind you, the lamp's tiny flame flickering like a heartbeat in the shadows. You slip outside, and the doors close again, slowly, heavily. There is no seal on these outer doors. The inner shrine is what matters, but even so, when the latch clicks, you feel the temple shift into its nighttime phase fully and completely. As you walk away, the senior priest murmurs beside you, "The god rests. Now, the temple breathes differently." He's right. The air feels thicker now, the silence deeper, the corridors dimmer. You've placed the god to rest, and now, the whole temple seems to rest with them. You leave the sanctuary corridor in silence, the faint glow of the lone lamp still flickering behind the sealed doors like a distant star. The temple feels heavier now, as though every carved column and painted relief has settled into sleep. But your duties aren't quite finished. There is one final round of work before the temple can truly surrender tonight. The full lockdown. No, not the panicked modern kind. This is softer, ritualized, rhythmical, like tucking in a colossal sacred house so it can dream safely until dawn returns. You follow two senior priests down a long hallway that seems twice as shadowy as it did earlier. The lamps spaced along the walls burn low, their flames tiny but stubborn, each one offering a small pocket of warmth in the cool, dense air. You hear almost nothing. just the soft pad of sandals and the faint scraping of linen when someone moves their arm. Your first task, the lamp walk. You approach each niche in the wall, checking the tiny oil lamps one by one. Some flicker weakly, their fuel nearly gone. A priest behind you hands you a small jug of sesame oil. You refill them carefully, drop by drop, until each flame straightens and brightens into a steady glow. The light seems to lift the weight of the darkness just a little. A mainstream historical fact. Temples did not go entirely dark at night. Certain lamps burned continuously for protection, purity, and to symbolize the steady presence of the divine. Night was a vulnerable time in Egyptian cosmology, Ra battling chaos in the underworld, and the lamps helped maintain order within the temple microcosm. Once the lamps are refreshed, you continue into the storage halls. You check the locks on the grain doors, the seals on the linen chests, the bolts on the workshop alcoves. Everything sits quietly, still warm from the day's work. A stray wood shaving crunches under your sandal. You gently sweep it aside. Even disorder this small would be frowned upon. Then comes the animal round. You and another priest return to the precinct, where the sacred animals sleep in calm clusters. The cats curl into tight spirals atop woven mats. The ibis perches on one leg, feathers puffed slightly. The cows lie peacefully in the straw. The crocodile pool is still, its dark surface unbroken. You whisper, a protective chant under your breath. Not out of requirement, but because the silence here makes you feel like you should. Historians still argue whether night rounds were motivated by ritual purity or practical security, or both. Some say priests feared thieves, others say they feared chaotic spirits. Watching the crocodile pool for too long, you suspect they feared everything equally. Next, you move through the workshop complex, extinguishing all but the guardian lamps. The pigments rest in their jars like sleeping colours. The unfinished carvings gleam faintly in the dimness. The tools lie neatly in rows, quiet as bones. You pause in the painter's chamber and watch a single lamp reflect in the eye of a half-finished goddess on the wall. For a moment you swear she blinks. You chalk it up to exhaustion. Finally, all that remains is the outer perimeter. You and the priests walk the full circuit of the temple's massive outer walls, towering structures that rise like stone cliffs against the star-dusted sky. The moon casts a pale glow across the courtyard as you pass through, the air cool, soft and thick with desert stillness. You check the main gates, their bar reinforced with bronze. The hinges groan lightly as you test them, but they hold firm. No unauthorized spirit or visitor will wander in tonight. One priest marks the threshold with a pinch of natron, pressing his thumb into it with a quiet invocation. Another whispers a protective line to Amun, just loud enough for you to hear. Guard this house as we guard your presence. A final task remains, extinguishing the ceremonial torches in the outer hall. You lower your hand over the flame, pinch the wick with wetted fingers, and watch darkness slowly swallow the light, softly, respectfully, like blowing a kiss to the end of the day. The room grows shadowed, but not cold. The senior priest turns toward you. "That's it," he whispers. "The temple sleeps now." You stand still for a moment, letting the quiet settle into your bones. The whole complex seems to breathe, slow, deep, ancient. A single entity dreaming beneath the stars. You've awakened the god, fed them, served the people, managed the economy, guided dreams, balanced purity, overseen rituals, maintained cosmic order, and now, finally, ensured the temple rests safely in the night. You take one slow breath, then another, and feel yourself exhale the entire day. The corridors grow dimmer as you walk back toward your own chamber, each step softer than the one before. The air is cool now, drifting gently against your skin, as though the temple itself is tucking you in along with everything else. The last lamps flicker in their niches, their warm halos trembling like sleepy eyelids, and even the carvings along the walls seem to relax into their shadows. You move slowly, no rush left in your body, just the easy flow that comes when a long day has finally eased into silence. The stone beneath your feet feels smoother, somehow the air thicker with the kind of quiet that settles deep into your chest. Every sound is softer, the faint burn of a lamp, the distant sigh of settling wood, the hush of linen brushing against your leg. You pause at an open courtyard, letting the cool night breeze slip across your face. Above you, the sky stretches wide and calm, stars scattered like tiny offerings across a velvet bowl. The moon hangs low, pale and gentle, its light pouring down the temple walls in long silver lines. You inhale, and the night smells faintly of lotus, warm stone, and the disappearing echo of incense. Your steps slow even more. The world feels farther away, softer, as though each moment is stretching out just enough to let your thoughts settle, one by one, like grains of sand drifting to the bottom of a clear pool. You find your place to rest, quiet, sheltered, warm from the day's lingering heat. You sit, then lie back, letting the earth cradle you, letting your breath lengthen, letting your body sink into comfort. The temple around you breathes in its ancient rhythm, safe, steady, calm. And somewhere in that deep, peaceful darkness, a small flame glows for you too, a quiet promise that dawn will come gently, and that you, like the temple, may rest now,